And I'm getting a little line loading in. Oh, and I'm getting a little line loading in. Now I've got the YouTube up on my screen.
Okay, so you should be able to close that window.
So if I close it, it's still open for other people?
Yep.
All right, so I'm going to exit out.
So you should be able to close that window.
I was just going to click on the X on the tab.
Yep.
So if I close it, it's still open for other people? Okay, I X'd out that tab.
Perfect. So just so you can see.
Aw.
All right, so we're definitely streaming. We're good. So
But
the next thing I want to do, there's a delay.
There's definitely a delay, yep.
Yep. It was like that with the Meet too. That's just how the stream works. I got to turn this down because it's killing me. Give me 1 second. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is going to have you stop the stream.
All right, wait a minute. So I got the record. All right,
So
you got to go to more again.
Yep.
Stop stream live.
Yep.
Right. If I stop, I'm going to be able to restart it again.
I don't know. We're going to find out.
What happens if we can't and people try to get in and we have to give them a new address? I haven't clicked that yet because I want to make sure that because that address has been given far and wide.
Well, so two things. One, this is why I want people to go to the website for the link.
I understand.
Two, you are going to have to do this to go into executive session, right? So
yeah, but we don't have a vote, so they don't have to come out of executive session and go back on and stream again. Hi, Bruce. Michael and I are still working on some technical issues.
Okay. Do I need to step out or?
No, you're fine. Just
okay.
be aware that we're already streaming. So like the live is linked. So anything you say is going to be visible to everybody. So be on your behavior.
Thank you. So difficult.
So the only time, I think we should practice this at another time, just to see what happens. But I think for tonight, where we're already streaming and we know it's streaming, let's just stay streaming because I have this gnawing feeling that, or worry that if we go out of it and we try to go back and restream again, it's going to tell us that the video's done and want us to
do a new one.
And normally you're right. People, they're supposed to go to the website. We would just change the link and they would link it at that time. But because in this particular case, people went to the website, copied it, and were spreading it all over Facebook, there'll be a whole lot of people who will be using an older link and will be really angry that they can't get in.
Right. So I'll say that I know I played with it a little bit when I was testing, but I tested so many different things that racking my brain for what. Yeah, I can't remember what worked and what didn't work, and I was on like 4 different platforms, and yeah. So I agree with you. We have this working. Let's stick with this for tonight. We can play with it more before the next meeting and test more thoroughly before you have to be in that situation.
That sounds awesome. The same thing. So the only thing I'm going to have to do now, once we're ready to start the meeting, will be to
record.
So make sure when you record, it's a little different. The only difference on Zoom is that you have options on whether to record locally or record to the cloud. So you want to make sure when you press the record button, it's going to ask you which one, and you're going to record to the cloud.
Record to the cloud. Okay. Because that first announcement came out, email came out, and had a Google address and a Zoom address for the participants,
I can go into the meeting and
Just send
Let
one
me-
more email reminding them that if their email has a Google address, they should use the Zoom address only.
I was just going to open the Google meeting, and if anybody jumped in, I'd tell them to
Perfect,
get out.
even better. And say, hey, you're in the wrong place. Whatever works. Oh my gosh. Who are the Bruins playing tonight? I didn't even pay attention.
Are you talking to me? Oh yeah, the Capitals.
A few years ago when I was in DC, I went to a Capitals game. I was with a buddy of mine from DC and a buddy of mine who grew up in Buffalo, and it was a Sabres Capitals game. And of course, the Bruins were not part of it, so I could really care less. But I had to sit between the two of them who were arguing all night.
All right, so I got that open. Shoot. Good. And then Jim should be joining us shortly and make sure that everything's working.
On Monday evening, he'd asked if we could log in at 7:15 so we could test the system for him. So I'm assuming, here's Michael.
So again, Paul, we should do a disclaimer as people join, just to let them know that we're already streaming.
To make sure that we could get streaming okay, we already started streaming. So while the meeting hasn't started yet, we are streaming our chat.
Thank you for telling me that.
That's a good point, Michael. As each new person arrives, we're going to have to give that message again.
I think, Paul, we're just going in order, like, right, again, that we talked about the other day. We don't need to move anything out because the budget vote, we won't need to wait for people to come on anyway, right?
Yes, you could take the budget vote out of order.
Some of the administration who might be on can depart. Okay.
Yeah, you can. So if there are things that, let's see. FICO's just an announcement that they received the newsletter. The school calendar is going to take a little bit of conversation. The benchmark one is just an FYI. The school calendar takes a little conversation. Graduation update. We'll have Dr. Mobley on, so we want to include her with that. That's probably an early conversation as well.
Should we move the handbook up, or do they need to be here for that, or?
I asked people to let me know that if they had any questions or concerns that if I needed to have an administrator on the call, or I could answer them myself. Only one person reached out to me, and I was able to answer his questions. It was odd.
Okay.
So I didn't ask the administrators to be back on.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Okay.
Jesse Grant update.
We didn't. Where are we gonna? I forget what we were gonna talk about next week. Did you have a plan for that?
I'm sorry,
Next week, the hearings.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm looking toward holding two town halls.
Okay.
One for the middle school, one for the high school. I'm concerned our licenses only run to 500.
Okay.
And we've had about 300 on each town hall. So if I try to do just one, I'll have a bounce off. So my thought would be that we have a town hall one night for the middle schools and the other night for the high school. And then Wednesday and Thursday of next week. And we can have,
Talk about having a meeting after.
the school committee would like to meet afterwards after they've heard, they could sit in on either of the town halls or both of them if they wanted to. And then afterwards, we could have a discussion after anything they've heard, if, if they wanted to add something further or, from there. I
So
then
this-
scheduled,
Oh, go ahead.
I've scheduled a tentative meeting for next Friday, the 7th, after those 2 town hall meetings, and also after the tentative idea that school committee would give me feedback, so that if there were any discussions that needed to happen between the administration and the teachers, we could do that on Friday, so that we would be ready for a Monday evening vote, and then for me to just hit send Monday evening because it's due Monday night.
Okay. So then maybe a meeting like Thursday at what, like 8 or something? I don't know what time are your town
And we
hall.
do the town halls from say 6:30 and limit them to about an hour and a half. We try to limit them to an hour, but there was a lot of discussion on both of those, and we wanted to try to get to as many questions and concerns in the chat as possible. So I would say 6:30 for the town halls, and then 8 o'clock for school committee meeting
On Thursday.
on Thursday.
Okay. We'll talk. We'll bring that up and see what people think. Okay.
And again, I think it would be an open meeting, but I don't think there's really an action item at that point. It would just be to ask further clarifying questions,
Right.
feedback, and discussion. So,
Because there's the Monday, the 10th meeting where we would.
right, that we'd have that meeting on the 10th where we would do the minutes and things like that.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Jim.
God bless America.
Well, an FYI. Go ahead.
So we are already streaming the meeting because we wanted to make sure that process was working okay. So it is streaming, although there's not an actual meeting yet. So if people,
I understand. Thank you for the heads up.
no problem.
I am hopeful that this will be reasonably calm on my end because I'm down at our Cape House with 6 grandchildren and 4 dogs. So anything.
Hey, what could go wrong, really?
Yeah.
No, hey, it's just another day in heaven. What can I say?
Welcome to a virtual classroom that our teachers are dealing with.
I have had a chance to read all the material that you sent out today, and also the comments regarding the mascot, which I find very interesting.
Absolutely.
And I must admit, I have a strong view on, but we'll discuss that, I'm sure, at some point in time.
Yep.
But anyway, I'm thrilled to have volume. Thank you.
We're very thrilled to hear you without having to
You can pass judgment at the end of the meeting on that, Paul. You may have preferred the silent me before we're done.
But it was the right thing to say. You got to say that much. Eric,
There you go.
we're just letting people know that we already started the live stream because this is the first time we're using this, and we wanted to make sure there wasn't a problem. So,
Okay.
the streaming so we are being streamed right now if anyone is starting to watch the live stream.
Now, Zoom is, I had several people take a look at my computer that know a lot more than me, and it was not my computer. There was something in that system you were using that locked me out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened. I'll
I don't
mention it briefly when we all come on together, what our thinking was at the time and
My tech advisors are in your middle school, so what?
My own children are now 26 and 28, almost, going on 27 and
Yeah.
29.
Did you get a chance to read through any of that material I sent you from Pittsburgh?
Some of it, not all of it. I have to confess because I've got multiple ones coming in. I've got the one that you sent. I've got Dade County, Florida. I've got one coming out of Texas. A number of people are sharing them with me, and superintendents are sharing them. And so I'm scanning some of them and pulling pieces. But we've been working 10, 12-hour days. But
I have another one that you might be very interested in. As I think you know, I consult for American Federation of Teachers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking with actually their president and today on a conference call because they're in the middle of their convention and I was participating in that. And they have done a lot of work on this, and they've brought together, I don't know how many districts, but they've brought a sort of a synopsis of all of the input that they've received from all the districts. And she sent that to me later today, and I'll forward that on to you. But I haven't read it all, but it's very interesting.
That's my weekend, sitting on the deck or sitting on the beach,
so
is going through all of that stuff, looking for more ideas,
Yeah.
looking for possibilities. We're looking to steal the best. There are a lot of great minds out there.
We're in an environment where plagiarism is the greatest form of flattery here right now, as far as I'm concerned. If
Well, the really nice thing about
this is a good idea, let's steal it.
we've got some great superintendents networks in Massachusetts, and actually Susan's on the right now and she's also on the assistant superintendent's listserv. And everyone is just sharing everything with everybody. We've created shared Google Docs to share sample letters and surveys and lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and whatever we can think of to try to help each other. And it's really great to hear what other districts are doing, so we know how well aligned we are with each other. And it also helps sometimes because, we know that sometimes people hear that things are happening in another community and they'll come back and they'll say, well, I heard here they're doing it this way. Why aren't we? Well, I can come back and say, well, actually, I've been on those listservs with those people, and this is exactly why they're doing what they're doing or not. And so it's very helpful.
Yeah, well, collective wisdom is always better than individual wisdom any day of the week.
Especially mine. I've been saying that every
at my
day.
age, if I haven't learned it by now, I'm a lost cause.
Just for those of Susan and the others who might have just come on, where we are live streaming, they started that just to test it, make sure it's working.
Got it.
Once we got it working, we were afraid that if we had to stop it and restart it, it might ask us to create a new link.
Okay.
That's it, fine, but we were afraid if we shut it down, then it might ask for a new link. And because so many people had shared the link, rather than necessarily going to our site, we didn't want anyone to be frustrated that the link that had been shared to them wasn't working, or only showed them that test segment. So we made the decision to just.
It's really nice to hear Jim talking.
Well, thank you for saying that. I hope you continue to feel that way over the next 6 months.
I will be the final vote of the meeting.
To be able.
After 15 years on the Board of Selectmen, I think the citizens of Norfolk are probably tired of hearing me talk.
Yeah, but it's nice to have a two-way exchange. It's helpful. So,
Well, thank you for that.
all good.
And by the way, my name is not Elizabeth, it's Jim.
Yeah.
It's a work.
Although after 50 years of marriage, I answer to Elizabeth. It's not.
Good evening,
Hi, Trevor.
Trevor.
Hey, good evening.
Trevor, we're not quite ready to stop, but we are sharing with people as they come on to the meeting that to test the live stream to make sure it was all set. We have already gone live stream, and we didn't want to shut it down when we knew it was working. So for anyone who's joining the live stream, they're seeing this conversation as we go. So we just
Oh,
want
great. Okay.
So we've got 1, 2, 3.
We have a quorum if Aaron is on. So I don't, I think Samad is late. Jim, maybe late, right?
Jim will be about 15 minutes late.
Jim
Yeah,
said he was gonna
Samad's
be
late, Jim's late, and Sarah's not able to join. Michelle should be here, right? Or
No,
she was
she's
coming
here.
from something else.
He was coming in hot, yeah.
So, we still got a couple minutes, but if we were in the high school library, it would show 7:30 already, but
That's
we're
right.
not here.
We have a new box. Someone's connecting. Very exciting.
Who's it gonna be? These Wiccans.
Hey, now we have the 9 squares. It's like Hollywood squares. X marks the spot. I'll take lower left for.
Lisa, I have volume.
Hello, how are you? Well, my dog does too.
Oh, well, I've got 4 dogs here, so don't get them going.
I'll mute this as soon as I can figure this out. There we go.
Nobody has a fancy background. I assume, Jim, that's a real place where you're sitting, not a fancy.
What was that, Mike?
I said nobody has a fancy Zoom background, but I was thinking maybe yours is, but no.
Mine's legit.
There's one, Larry.
Oh, that's not legit.
Larry's at Fenway, which is not a surprise.
Hey, Aaron, are you on? Just unmute or just getting ready here? Just curious. You can hear us. We have stepped away.
your mic, sorry.
Oh, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we hadn't heard from you, so I just. So I think the only other person we're waiting for is Michelle, right?
Right, and she was coming right from another meeting.
Yeah. Well, we'll just give it a minute here and then we can start. We have a quorum.
Okay.
Well, we do have a quorum.
Yep.
We know when we take the budget vote, though, we're going to need a 2/3 vote on that one. So
Right.
we'll want to have at least one more person joining us for that.
Yeah. That's far enough down. Oh, here she is.
Michelle.
Okay, great. Oh, this is your, oh, we'll let her show up.
All right, so if we have everybody and it's 7:30, are you ready for me to begin? All righty, I'm going to start recording at this point, if I can do this right. And I'm recording to the cloud as Mr. Boyce told me to do. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the school committee meeting of July 30th, 2020. It's 7:30 p.m. and we'll be ready to begin the meeting. I'm Paul Zalou, Superintendent of Schools, and this evening I am beginning the meeting because this evening's first agenda item is to recompose the school committee for the next school year. And so I will begin with our announcement. That is that this meeting of the King Philip Regional School District is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. Order suspended certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law 30A, Section 20. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will present public comment during that designated portion of the meeting. As directed in the posting, public comment should have been emailed to the superintendent, in this case, that is me, the superintendent of schools prior to the start of the public comment section of the meeting and will be read by the superintendent on the commenter's behalf. For this meeting, the King Philip Regional School District is convening by Zoom as posted on the district's website, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and that take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. So that being said, thank you very much and welcome everybody. Good evening. The first order of business for this evening would be to restructure the school committee for the 2020-2021 school year. And prior to making a motion for our new, for a chair for that school year, I want to stop by taking a roll call vote of the members present. So as I go across the screen, Michael G. Michael, you're muted.
Sorry, Mike G. Norfolk.
Jim? Jim Lehan, would you identify yourself as here?
I am here.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
Bruce Cates, Plainville.
Great. Trevor?
Trevor Rentham.
Excellent. Michelle?
Michelle Schapp, Plainfield.
Erin? Erin, you were muted.
Sorry, Erin DeStefano Rentham.
Perfect. Other guests joining us this evening are Susan Gilson, our Assistant Superintendent, Larry Azar, our Director of School Business Management, and Michael Boyce, our Technology Director, and Dr. Mobley just joined us, our high school principal. He's going to be able to give us a couple of updates in a little bit.
Paul, I neglected to identify myself as from Norfolk, so my apologies.
Great. Thank you, Jim. So with everybody here, having a minimal quorum, I would like to take nominations for chair of the school committee for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion for a chair of the committee?
Trevor Knott, I move that Mike G serve as chair.
I will second.
Excellent. Seconded by Jim Lehan. Any discussion regarding this? Any additional nominations for chair? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote for Michael G. as chair of the King Philip Regional School Committee for the 2020-2021 school year. Let's see. Erin DeStefano.
Erin DeStefano, aye.
Michelle Shop.
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Trevor Knott.
Trevor Knott, aye.
Bruce Cates.
Bruce Cates, aye.
Jim Lehan.
Jim Lehan, aye.
Michael G.
Mike G, aye.
I didn't actually ask you, Michael, before we took the vote, if you were willing to accept the nomination, but I'm very glad that you voted yes.
Thank you. Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thanks for opening the meeting. I guess we'll just round out this reorganization. So I would ask for a nomination for vice chair.
I'll make a motion to nominate Samad Khan for our co-chair or vice chair.
Yep. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, a roll call vote. Mike G, yes. Jim?
Jim Lehan, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce Cates, aye.
Trevor?
Trevor Knott, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Erin?
Erin DeStefano, aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. I would also entertain a motion to approve the subcommittee reorganization that was distributed prior to the meeting.
So move, Trevor Knott.
Seconded.
Sorry, I missed a second. Jim?
Yep, second.
Okay, roll call. Mike G, aye. Jim?
Jim Lehan, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce Cates, aye.
Trevor?
Trevor Knott, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Erin?
Erin DeStefano, aye.
Okay, so I believe this is where we should take public comment, right? This is,
Yes, sir.
actually, I don't see it written here now that I'm looking at this, but this is the portion of the meeting up front where we do public comment.
Correct.
So I believe you have received some public comment, Paul. So this is how we're doing it in this particular COVID era. Okay.
Exactly. So actually, before I do that, I do want to just say thank you to everybody. I should have done this before I actually opened the meeting for nominations. Thank you all for your patience and understanding that we had to close off Monday evening's meeting and reschedule it because of the glitch we had regarding the open meeting law and the technology we were using. When we had to change to a virtual meeting and we struggled to try to come to some kind of understanding with that, we did a lot of work trying to decide what the best platform would be. Because our district is already Google platform, and because we knew that it was a fairly secure platform, and because it was free for us, which we like that price, we moved forward with the Google platform for our virtual school committee meetings. Unfortunately, although we did multiple tests on this, each time we did, they were staff members of KP. And so we were always using our KP emails at that time and did not realize that someone who was trying to access a meeting without a KP email address might have difficulty with that. We're glad we discovered the problem. We have since purchased a Zoom license that will allow us to do all the things we need, and we'll move forward. And once again, I apologize to any community members who were inconvenienced because of that, and I especially apologize to all of you who sat through an hour-long meeting only to start all over again. And I so appreciate your understanding and your support. And with that, I will move into the public comments. You know that for public comment, people were asked to email me their public comments. I will share with you that over the last 4 or 5 months, I've received many comments on school opening issues, school closing issues, all of those. And tonight I also received some other comments that you'll hear were regarding our school mascot and name. And so while many emails come to me as superintendent, and those I try to respond to, which I will do, these 4 appear to be ones that were being asked to be read into the meeting as public comments. So the first one I will begin with by saying, my name is Nancy Hemmingson Lowell Colwell. I hope I got that right. I apologize in advance for any names I may mess up this evening. I haven't had a lot of time to practice them. I am a member of the first graduating class of King Philip Regional Vocation Technical High School. My father, Edward Hemmingson Sr., was on the planning, building, and original school committee. My children and grandchildren are second and third generation KP graduates. It was not a mistake that the first 4 classes of students to enter the halls of King Philip voted to name the school after Meta Comet, who anglicized his own name to honor him by adopting his warriorship for the school's symbol. My father was concerned that we were naming the school after a dance hall. The majority of the students prevailed. King Philip was a great leader of his people. He, like most American natives, was poorly treated by the white people. We chose to honor King Philip and his warriors. Please keep the wonderful legacy that has been created. King Philip is well known and respected. Please do not destroy this history. And so that is our first public comment. Our second public comment comes from Tracy Malloy. Tracy writes, or we would be saying to you personally, I sincerely appreciate the challenges that KP faces this year. No answer will solve all the problems or satisfy all the students, teachers, and parents. I would like to remind the administration and school committee that these years cannot be replaced. My daughter is a rising senior. She lost so much of junior year, and now senior year looks very bleak. She has always been a great student and loved school. The social emotional impact that virtual learning has on her was devastating. She and her friends are devastated to get back, are desperate to get back to school, some type of in-person learning as well, and reconnecting to teachers and staff. Some of the academics can be learned online, but the lack of person-to-person relationships and contact needs to be addressed. School is more than delivering curriculum, and I hope that there will be significant thought given to the teacher/student relationships, as well as finding a way to keep students connected to each other. As I stated before, I am happy to help in any way that I can. I know parents are willing to help. Thank you, Tracy Malloy. Our third public comment statement comes from Kristen Baelish. I believe I said that right, I hope. And I apologize again if I've messed up on somebody's name. I usually try to prep that in advance, but these came in late. So she is from Norfolk, Mass. Dear KP School Committee, I noticed that on tonight's agenda was an item on the KP school name/mascot. Because I am not certain of the context to this for this item, I did want to share some thoughts, but will keep them brief. I am a resident of Norfolk with 2 children who will be entering the KP system in several years. Even if the potential state level bill regarding Native American school names does not pass, I encourage us as a district to explore how we use King Philip in our names and branding. I have heard good and fair opinions from many in town on both sides of the issue. That for some, this is honorific and a way to ensure we do not forget the complicated history of colonization in our region. And for others, this is not the best way to actually accomplish this unless it is accompanied by real action to repair the harm and trauma done to Native communities. I do not pretend to know the right answer, but I truly believe this is the right time to have the conversation. Local Native American groups have been pretty explicit that they would prefer to not have their images used as mascots, and my understanding is that KP has moved away from the logo using a Native American figure. The question in my mind is, does this change how the indigenous people feel about the use of the name King Philip? Should we instead refer to him as Metacom/Metacomet, for example? Would they ask us to improve our Native American history curriculum if we continue to use the name? The most important point I want to make is that whatever conversation is had needs to include Native American perspectives as the primary voice. My opinion as a white resident honestly should not be what is informing what the right thing to do is. As they say, history is written by the victors. To assume what the Wampanoag people may want is harmful and condescending. We should instead ask them to partner with us in this work. I thank you for bringing us up this topic at a time where it can likely feel like so many things are urgent, and you all are doing this in a voluntary capacity. I hope you are all staying well and staying safe. Respectfully, Christian Baelish, Norfolk, Mass. And finally, we had one additional public comment, and this was signed actually by it looks like 4 families, Jill and John Lawrence, Kendra and Jay, Canali, Jeff and Diane Codner, and Michael and Natalie Ian Tosca. And again, I apologize if I didn't get any of those names completely right. And they write, respectfully, we write to offer important parent perspective from watching our children miss out substantially on a public school education for 3 full months as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. As we are sure that you would agree, the cost of having a remote education this past spring was very high in terms of lost student learning, as well as district teachers having to manage a new difficult situation. The quality and quantity of virtual school hours are not even closely compared to an in-person education. We recognize as parents of a diverse set of learners that curriculum is best delivered within a classroom environment to benefit, educate, and connect with all types of students. We agree it is also important to offer families and staff with documented medical concerns to opt for a remote option. We feel strongly that getting the majority of kids back into the classroom in September in either a full-time or hybrid basis is imperative. According to CDC Director Robert Redfield, the unique and critical role that schools play makes it a priority to open schools safely this fall and to help them stay open. This will enable students to receive both academic instruction and support, as well as other critical services. CDC guidelines are put out with the intent to help facilitate the full reopening of schools for face-to-face learning. They are not put out there to be a rationale to keep the schools closed. It is in the best public health interest, K through 12, for them to get back in school. School closures have disrupted normal ways of life for children and parents, and they have had negative health consequences on our youth. And they give us the citation of where that quote came from. I can forward this email to you afterwards, so you would have the citation as well from that quote. It comes from the CDC Gov Media. So although these challenging times clearly call for innovation and technology tools to enhance learning, continued full-time remote education would be disastrous to our children's emotional well-being and scholastic growth. We firmly believe the scholastic, mental, and social costs from continuing a virtual education far outweigh the risks of returning to school, especially when the risk of virus transmission is significantly mitigated by the use of face coverings. With Massachusetts being one of the leading states in public education, and with KP Regional School District as a leader in the Commonwealth, we implore you to share your plans for reopening the schools and to partner with parents to ensure that the 2021 school year is successful. We understand that our districts have established reopening committees that include administrators, teachers, parents, and students. There are plans for a similar committee for the KP School District. We would be pleased to help in any way we can, be it brainstorming solutions, finding the needed technology enhancements, or raising the needed capital. Please give us an update on the planning work to date. And so those were the 4 public comments that I received that were clearly designated as public comments for this evening. As I said, not just today, but for the last few months, I've received a number of comments from people on various matters, and I've been doing my best to try to get back to families within 2 or 3 days. As of yesterday, I was all caught up, but obviously a new batch has come in today, and I'll do my best to respond to them over the weekend.
Okay, am I mute? Oh, I'm on. Okay.
You're on.
Alrighty, so I'm just going to run through, thank you, Paul, and thank you for doing this. This is first public comment we've received in this era, and we don't get much in general, so that's fantastic. So I'm going to move on to some routine business here, and then we'll get into what we're waiting to do here. First is approval of the minutes of July 6, 2020. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? You have to unfortunately be off mute to move that.
So moved.
From Jim. Okay. And,
Bruce Cates, second.
Bruce Cates, second. I'll note for the record, it looks like Jim Killian, you're here. Jim Killian.
For our attendance purposes, it looks like Jim Killian has joined the call. Jim, could you say here, please?
He doesn't have audio yet, or video.
Actually, it looks like his may be frozen. I'm not positive.
Okay, well, we'll keep moving. So roll call vote. Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan.
Aye.
Bruce.
Bruce Cates, aye.
Trevor.
Trevor Knott, aye.
Michelle,
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Aaron,
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Jim?
Abstain, sorry, abstain. I wasn't here for that meeting.
Yeah, Killian, you with us yet? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the warrants that we were sent for this meeting?
So moved. Aaron DeStefano.
Okay, is there a second?
Second,
Okay, roll call vote. Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan?
Jim Lehan, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce, aye.
Trevor Knott,
Trevor?
aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Aaron?
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Jim Killian, you with us?
I am with you. However, I did not hear what the motion is.
Okay, we're approving warrants.
Jim Killian, aye.
Okay. Then is there a motion to approve and hold the executive session minutes of July 16th?
Bruce Kate, so moved.
Second.
Okay, Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan?
Jim Lehan, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce Kate, aye.
Trevor?
Trevor Knott, aye.
Michelle?
Michelle Sharp, aye.
Aaron?
Aaron DeStefano, abstain.
Same, Mr. Killian?
Jim Killian, aye.
Okay, so those have been approved and hold. All right, so I think we'll move into the communication. This is where things sort of fell apart the other day. I don't know that you have, the FICO newsletter was, that's for information only at this point. Benchmark calendar is for information only if anybody has any questions. The 2020-2021 school calendar.
Yes, so we sent you a draft of a calendar, and actually I think it was uploaded this afternoon because things have been changing dramatically and very quickly. So as of last Friday, we received a report from the commissioner that the Department of Education would be holding school districts to a 180-day calendar, 990 hours of instruction for high school students, 900 for elementary students. That's been the standard. On Monday evening around 5 o'clock, I believe, we got a new notice from them saying that they were changing that, reducing the number of hours out of requirement, and also allowing the school district to use up to 10 days of school only prior to the start of school for preparation before bringing students back to school. And so therefore your end date would be the same as what you voted earlier, but we would be bringing back staff 10 days. The first 10 days of school would be for staff only, for us to prepare for them coming back to school. We've looked at our calendar. Because our contract says that teachers don't come back to work until July 1st, we would be able to use the exactly 10 days before that the governor gave us, excuse me, the commissioner gave us, because he is requiring that students would have to be back to school by September 16th. So by using 10 days, it would bring us back to exactly September 16th. The students would come back on that Wednesday. We already have 2 additional days built into the calendar, but we couldn't squeeze those in before the September 16th. But what I would actually strongly recommend is that we already have one as a professional day on the day after Columbus Day. I would suggest that we put both of them there, and that would allow us to be open for a month and then to have 2 days to get together and to look to see what's working, what's not working, what has to be revised, because this is all brand new to us. You're going to hear later on when we talk about the 3 plans that we've been working on to prepare. There's so much going on. But to just explain very briefly why I believe the 10 days are crucial and why the commissioner felt they were crucial as well and gave them to us to be able to use, is because we're coming back in unprecedented times. We're coming back with significant safety issues that we have to be worried about. And so just going through safety issues alone is going to be, it's going to take a bit of time. I mean, there are so many things that we have to coordinate, such as how do we have a fire drill the first week of school? We're required by law to do that. Now we know in a fire, we want all of the students to file out quickly. We're not worried about 6-foot distancing, but by law, we have to practice that drill under a 6-foot, the 3-foot, 6-foot distancing requirements. What does that look like? There are so many things just in the safety and the new protocols that we're going to have to go over as a staff first, and then go over with our students the first days. Then add to that the professional development we're going to need to give our teachers around using the tools that we're going to need to have them use when they're doing the remote and hybrid teaching and all of that. And then additionally, the staff is going to need some time to do what I refer to as curriculum compacting. What we need to do is to take the curriculum frameworks that the Massachusetts, Department of Education has put out and look at the essential components of that for next year, and recognizing that our students missed some of the end components from last year. And how do we maximize learning for this year to make sure our students get the highest quality education possible. So there's a lot of work involved with that. There's a lot of prep involved with that, and bringing back the teachers first makes a tremendous amount of sense. Both the teachers union and the superintendent's organization were both asking the Department of Education to consider doing something like this, and we were pleased that they did. And so we've given you a calendar of what that would look like, and I certainly am open to have conversation what people think about that, and whether they would agree to that new calendar.
Sorry, Paul, this is Erin. I might have missed it. Are our teachers, according to the contracts, okay starting on September 1st? I thought they had to come back after Labor Day.
No, it says they can't come back before September 1st.
Okay, perfect.
They're coming back on September 1st. So
Okay, good. For some reason, I had Labor Day in my mind, so thank you.
Me too. My former district, that was what the contract language read, but it's September 1st, and that's how we designed the calendar already. The one change is that our initial calendar had that Friday off. So they would have come to school the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. The Friday before Labor Day would have been off, but that wouldn't give us the 10 days. We would only have 9 days. So we would do the 10 days, and there's nothing in the contract that prohibits us from having that Friday day. So
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you.
Can you just clarify what you're asking us to approve at this point? Is this calendar 5, or is it all of the calendars, or like what?
So the start date for staff was always going to be September 1st.
Right.
Students were going to come back September 2nd.
Right.
We're now asking you to approve a start date for the students of September 16th.
Okay. That's what you're asking.
That's basically the change of the calendar. Those 10 days are still work days for the teacher, because by contract, they already work 182 days. 180 days normally with students and 2 professional development days. So they would now work 10 days before, then the students would come back, and then the 2 professional development days would be in October for us to regroup, to see what we did right, what we need to improve, what we need to fix, and then move forward from there.
So, hey, Paul,
Yes.
just so you know, at least on my end, your audio comes in and out a little bit.
I'm
There you go.
sorry about that.
It's only when Jim's unmuted, I've noticed.
Paul, I have a question.
Yes.
What measurables are you going to establish for that 10-day period?
Measurables in which sense?
What specifically are you planning on utilizing that time for, and how are you going to measure the success of that?
I didn't plant that question, by the way.
Trevor's the data guy. And, Jim, I will tell you that we literally found out at 5 o'clock on Monday, and this is Thursday, that we even had the option, and we looked at the calendar. We have not mapped out what those 10 days would look like. But what I would say to you is this. Some of the measurables would be that all of our staff are using the proper protocols that we outlined. We're going to be inviting the Department of Public Health. We're going to be inviting our school doctor to be doing training for our staff, and then we have to transition that to our students. So not only are our staff, but one of the measures will be that our staff will be modeling safe practices, but they will also be properly teaching our students how to follow those safe practices in school.
Yeah, Paul, that was probably an unfair question, seeing as you just learned about it today. But what I would ask is that when you have that mapped out, that be shared with the committee so that we understand exactly how that's used and what the measurables are.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a question, if possible. I see we're still building in 5 days for school closures. We call them snow days, could be a hurricane or whatever else. Would it be, in this day where we have proven that we can do remote learning, is it unlikely that we'll ever use that again unless there's a widespread power outage?
I can't say for future years, but I was on a call with the Commissioner of Education on Wednesday, and one of the things that we asked him was, if we were to have snow days this year, would we be able to move to a remote format? And he said he believed yes. He didn't say definitely. He said he believed yes. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't. I will also share with you a question that I posed in that commissioner's chat that didn't get answered. But I'm also looking at the heat index. We have common spaces in both of our buildings that are air conditioned, libraries, auditorium. And so if we were to have a very hot day, what our very creative administrators would be doing would be finding ways to rotate large groups of students into those air conditioned areas to give them a break from the heat. Under these conditions, we can't use those spaces in that way. And we're requiring students and staff to be masked at all times, with the exception of those brief mask breaks that we will be giving them at a couple of points during the day. We have classrooms that get upwards of they follow the temperature of the outside. And so actually Joey Zahner, our facilities person, and our custodians have been measuring classroom and the gymnasium, the cafeteria. They've been measuring the temperatures over the last week or two per my request to see what those temperatures look like. And basically they're within a couple of degrees of what it's like outside, and that's with no bodies in them. So I think in the same way that we normally watch for a snowstorm, in September and October, I'm going to be needing to watch the news every night. And if we have a high heat day, like the last couple of days that we had, where we've had temperatures in the 90s and, when we're approaching 100, as long as we get the feedback from the commissioner that we're able to do this, I would then need to perhaps call a couple of remote days for heat purposes, because it's hard enough to be in those classrooms without a mask. That's just a concern I have. So we're going to have to figure out what that threshold is. If the forecast is this temperature, then we go with we announce a snow day. Tomorrow will be a remote day due to excessive heat. What would that threshold be? We're not there yet. As you're going to hear as we go through this evening and we start talking about all of the different things going on, what I will share with you, I have many, many more questions that I have answers, but at least we're beginning to ask the questions. So in the same way we'll be looking at snow, we also have to look at the safety of our students and staff regarding heat.
Thank you.
I was going to ask, you mentioned in response to Jim's question about things like safety and things like that. Is there an opportunity during that period to dry run some of these hybrid models? And, because you've got teachers, well, not to jump ahead, but you got teachers teaching to two constituents at once and things like that. Is there an opportunity to kind of work through some of that?
There is opportunity. Right now, we have not mapped this out. The ideas we have for those 10 days right now are three broad silos. Silo one would be safety and security and all of the procedures that have to go along with that. Silo two is around looking at the curriculum again to make sure that we maximize the curriculum and instruction. And that has to be some serious conversation. Yep. Silo three is around planning with teams, planning in departments, so that we maximize the learning that goes on. And so that kind of thing would be happening, Michael, but I just don't know exactly what that would look like yet, because we just haven't gone to that degree. But that would be the third silo, is really making sure that when you see the hybrid plan, and some of you had a chance to kind of preview that, when you see that when the students are not in the classroom getting direct instruction from the teacher and they're working from home, that those activities are as rich and meaningful as what's happening in the classroom. And that's basically what's going to be happening is teachers are going to be prepping for basically 10 classes rather than 5, because there's in-school teaching for American history and at-home teaching for American history. And what does that look like? So again, we're still working on all those details. We had to just get to a point of having the models in place and looking at all of the ripples that go along with that. But those are the three broad silos that we see happening. We also then have to figure out how we take 250 to 60 staff members, provide them all with this training, but not doing so in large group. So we might have to create stations, if you will, like we do with students in a classroom, and maybe have 40 people working on this topic in the library, and 30 more in the auditorium working on this topic on this day, and then rotate people through those stations over the 10-day period to make sure that we don't have the days of bringing all 260 people into the auditorium on the first day of school, where I start everything off with the Go Team Go speech and get everyone excited about the start of the new school year. Those kinds of things can't happen in the same way. So we're going to have to part of that planning is going to be how do we get this, maximize the professional development, but also keep our staff socially distant at the same time. So lots of layers to this.
Paul, I don't know if this is the right place for the question, but one of the things that concerns me, and I think all of us, is the resurgence of this virus. And so far, the Northeast seems to be holding its own, but it is clearly migrating our way. And I know we all know of several instances that have happened in our local communities recently where students have spread this virus. What I did not see in the plan, nor is it requested, so that's not a criticism in any way, is what happens if we're into our strategy, whatever that might end up, and based on what you sent out today, I think you've answered those questions very well. What happens if we have a significant resurgence of this virus in October? What I have not seen, and nor have I seen the state request it, what is the plan to modify our strategy at that point in time to try and control that?
Okay, so you're fast forwarding to when we talk about the 3 plans. So you're stealing a little bit of my presentation thunder, but I'm happy to talk about that right now. So when we created 3 plans, one of the reasons why the commissioner asked us to have 3 is not because it's a choice being given to families. Which one would you prefer? It's about having 3 plans depending on where we are as a state when we actually open our doors. So if in fact we could have all students in the building, that's one plan. Now that, as you saw in my proposal, and I will talk about it again further, that would be very, very difficult with the resources we have to bring everybody back in. And I'll talk in more detail as to why when we get to that piece of it. But we know that there are a number of companies working on vaccinations. So if in January there's a vaccination out there and they make students and staff and teachers a priority and everyone gets vaccinated and all of a sudden January 15th, it's safe for everyone to be back in the building and not socially distanced, the plan has to work that way. The hybrid plan that we have, which would transition directly into a full return, and it also transitions directly into a full remote. So all 3 of them will transition from one to the other. The goal of this would be to move seamlessly so that if on Tuesday afternoon, I get called to an emergency meeting and we're told that the governor is shutting down the state again because there's been a spike and we have to close our physical plants for an undisclosed amount of time, we can announce tomorrow, and starting tomorrow and from further notice, we're now in a remote day, and the schedule that we have in place that the students will be following absolutely works for full remote. And they just go to that schedule. And then if it reopens and we start to bring students back, we come back to the hybrid, so they flow one into the other.
So
Okay, any further questions? Oh, go ahead, Bruce. Yes.
how does this affect our buses? If we flip-flop from one schedule to the other schedule, back to another schedule, how is this affecting that supply chain?
I'm going to turn to Larry because Larry's been working directly with the buses, but we're still talking with them about transportation. The transportation guidance only came out in the middle of last week, which we'll mention when we talk about the 3 plants as well. So we're looking at maybe 35 to 40% capacity, but we're working on that. So go ahead, Larry. I think you can do a better job at that than me.
Well, so what specifically are you asking about with transportation, Bruce?
I guess I'm kind of curious how on board they are with the uncertainty in the schedule. If we tell them we need them this week and then next week we don't, and then we need them for the next 3 weeks, depending on what scenarios play out.
Well, we haven't gotten to that point yet, but they understand that we're looking at doing a hybrid half in, half out, which should be fine with them because like Paul said, the guidance on kids on the bus is basically 1 per seat. So it's about 25 kids per bus. So that's about half as many kids as usually ride the bus. So that shouldn't be a problem. Plus on top of that, if we're doing A, B hybrid, it'll probably be even less than that because there's probably going to be some kids who opt for fully remote anyway. So they should be able to handle that.
Just have to make sure that they're picking up the right kids on the right days.
Yeah, that's the thing. They haven't built the routes yet because a lot of it is going to depend on who's in each group.
Yeah.
And I know Dr. Mobley is working feverishly on that. Yeah, so there's the thing is that even though you would only have half the number of kids to pick up on a given day, you still have to cover the same geographic area. So, you know, unless Lisa's able to divide the kids up by geography, which I'm not necessarily suggesting, but if you did it that way, then you would have some potential consolidation of time on the routes. But otherwise, it's just going to be, you've got to pick up kids all the way down in Plainsville and all the way up in Norfolk and everywhere in between. It's just there's going to be fewer of them. So, you know, that shouldn't, time-wise, it shouldn't be a problem. So in the sense that the routes shouldn't be any longer. If anything, they might be shorter. But yeah, it's we haven't fully gotten to the place of how we're going to structure them. You know, we're going to do the same routes on A day and B day just to keep it consistent, or we're going to have A routes and B routes because that could get kind of confusing for the drivers, for the kids, for everybody. So that's a work in progress.
Again, we're not, as Larry said, we haven't worked that out yet, but I do think probably having the same route each day consistent is probably going to be the best bet because we have students who are going to be allowed to start remote, and at some point if they want to add back in, they can, regardless of what plan we pick. And if students perhaps are starting with us, but then something happens, they get sick or a family member gets sick and they can't continue coming in school, we're going to have to educate them fully remote. So the student cohorts can change in the blink of an eye. And so we want to try to have as consistent a run as possible on that. In regards to an A and a B cohort, which we'll talk, again, we're kind of jumping ahead, but I think these are all great questions, and whether we answer them now or we answer them a little bit further down the road, we need to answer them. We're starting from the high school and working our way down. Remember, and I can't stress this one enough, and honestly, Dr. Mobley has been absolutely incredible throughout this whole process because she has run more scenarios than you could ever possibly imagine. And when I describe to you what we're trying to describe, it's mind-boggling. But think about roughly 1,300 students in 4 grades with the program of studies that you approved back last winter with the variety of courses that we offer, every single one of them having their own unique schedule. No 2 kids go through 7 periods in a day going to the exact same rooms all 7 periods. They might have 2 or 3 classes with each other if they happen to have similar interests and similar academic levels, but every student is all over the place and every teacher has a different schedule. And so to try to build a hybrid model where half the kids are in the school and half the kids are home and you're keeping the numbers down in each classroom, visualize this for a minute. First period, I'm the algebra teacher and I have a class caseload, and some of our classes run as high as 35, not all of them. But let's say I have 30 in my class. So to give me a half a class, I would have 15 in front of me and 15 home. The 15 who are in front of me first period for algebra are now going to 15 different locations for second period. History, English, world language. And whatever class they arrive to needs to be at half capacity as well. And then on down. And in the process of doing that, we have to make sure that our students, wherever possible, receive the kind of instruction that they want to get, that they get the classes that they want to take. So Infinite Campus, our data management system, because we can program a lot of information, helps us with that to some degree, but we're going to begin at the high school, create those A and B cohorts there, and then share that information with the middle school, and they're going to do their best to keep any siblings in the same A or B cohort for transportation purposes, and again, for things like, if there's childcare, there might be a family that doesn't want their 7th grader home alone, and so they want their 10th grader with their 7th grader. And so for all of those reasons, we're going to try to coordinate that. But it has to stop from the high school because of the complexity of that. And then the bus transportation works from there.
Hey, Paul, you may have said already, and I apologize if you didn't. So do we know what the elementaries are doing yet with this?
Yes, we do. So I've been, again, as you know, we work very, very closely with them, and they're in the same boat, trying to desperately figure out how to respond to every new problem that shows up. But they're looking at, for the hybrid model, an AA cohort, Wednesday being a remote day, and then a BB cohort. Now, I haven't confirmed with Plainville, but I understand that that's definitely Norfolk and Rentham. I was on the phone with Dr. Alati the other evening, and she said the elementaries were all going that way. So I want to make sure I'm not 100%, but I know Norfolk definitely said that, that's what the direction that they were going in. And I don't know if they've had a final vote on that yet, so I don't want to put that out as gospel. I want to be careful because we've had so many starts and stops. But my understanding is AA, the middle day would be a virtual day, even in our hybrid plan. It allows us to have no one in the building to do a full deep clean. And it also allows us to regroup during the course of the week. At the elementary level, they're going to stay in the same room, and it works very well to have the same kids in for 2 days, then they can clean and have the other 2 days in. At the high school, the AA virtual BB does not work as well because of the fast-paced movement of the instruction. The teachers really feel strongly that they need AB, virtual AB. And, we've had a lot of conversation on that, and I really respect where they're coming from on that. They make very good points there. At least
just to stop you, I meant in relation to this calendar.
I'm sorry, because we were talking about the
well, I know. We're going to vote on the calendar. Sorry, I went back to the calendar. This is important. I know we're going to talk about it more, but that's okay.
I can confirm, Mike, that Rentham is planning to front load those 10 days.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. And with respect, Paul, to the hybrid, you're correct that our hybrid does look like that. AA, Wednesday to clean the school, BB. But, one point of clarification that's different for Rentham, I'm not sure about Plainville or Norfolk, and but for Rentham, it's certainly different than KP. Rentham can actually accommodate the full in-person return to school option with all the restrictions. So we can fit the kids in the classrooms with the appropriate spacing and so forth. So that is a viable option for Rentham at this point. And so no decision has been made as to whether we would go that route or a hybrid, but I just wanted to put that out there as a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Trevor, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, to go where Mike was, should we get this calendar vote done and then get deeper in this conversation? Because I want to get back to that in-person conversation that Aaron just was alluding to. We kind of jumped right into this whole hybrid discussion.
So
shall we take
the calendar at this point? Is there a motion to approve the calendar? Calendar option 5.
Yes, I'll make that motion.
Trevor, yep.
Aaron DeStefano, I'll second.
Is there any further discussion or questions about the calendar? I'll take a roll call vote. Mike G. I. Jim Lehan. You're on
mute, Jim.
Old habits, being muted. Jim Lehan, aye.
Okay, Trevor.
Trevor, not aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Aaron.
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Jim Killian.
Jim Killian, aye.
And I see Samad, you're with us?
I am.
Okay, is that an aye?
Yep, Samad Khan, aye.
All right, great. So that we've addressed that, now we'll move into the...
Bruce Cates, aye also.
Oh, I'm sorry, did I skip somebody? Oh,
it's all right.
One of these I'm going to call Larry. It's going to happen. So of these next items, Paul, district response, graduation update, DESI grant update reopening options. Are there 4 separate items there, or are we gonna, or we're really talking about the reopening item options? How do you want to?
I think it all blends together at this point, Michael. I think the first parts of it we can do. I mean, the district response update is really to share with you the 3. That's all in one.
Okay, yeah.
And
Okay.
but I did want to make sure that we spent a moment or two to thank people who helped with the graduation. Dr. Mobley I specifically asked to join us tonight. Not like she doesn't have enough nighttime meetings and daytime meetings and everything, but graduation was just a few days ago, and so I thought it would appropriate. Some of you may have been able to watch the live stream of that. I hope you maybe get to see a piece of it. We streamlined the number of speeches that were given. The students were the top priority, and of course, a very eloquent speech by your chair, Mr. G, did a wonderful job. Initially, the Sun Chronicle gave me credit, but it was all Michael's representation. He did a really great job, and I appreciated the fact to get a year off and not have to write a speech. But there we had over 300 graduates, each of them with 2 guests. So we brought in over 1,000, almost 1,000 people, tried to socially distance them as they arrived, as they were seated, as they got their diplomas, and then as they left. And the amount of planning that went into that was absolutely staggering. And we certainly owe Dr. Mobley, as the leader of the building, a tremendous thank you and kudos. And I know she's going to be mentioning a few people that work with her as well, that helped to make this all happen. But I think everyone I heard from seemed to be very, very pleased with the evening, and that we were able to give one final congratulations to our 2020 graduates and let them actually wear their caps and gowns. And so I guess I'd ask Dr. Mobley if she would like to say something.
So before I thank everyone, I have one apology. And first it's to the chair and to Elizabeth, because I have the most incredible name block regarding Elizabeth G. Like, I sought her out and called her in my office and asked her a question and looked her in the face and called her Marion. So, and I guess when I was talking about the class officers and our secretary, I gave credit to her oldest sister. So I definitely want to thank Elizabeth for all the work she did on behalf of the senior class, and also recognize her as the secretary. So I'll still call her Marion probably when I see her, in a year. But graduation and all the things that happened for the seniors this year, really, I cannot take any credit for it whatsoever. It was really the Parents Network, the KP Sports Boosters, Mrs. Rowe, Mrs. Sneed, the class advisors, Mrs. Quinn, the yearbook advisor. Everyone really pulled together. Joey Zana, all the custodians. When they say it takes a village, let me tell you, it takes a village to run graduation during COVID-19 or a pandemic. But I guess for me, what was most joyous is to see the parents handing their children their diplomas and being on that stage, and they were all so happy. I did go back and watch some of the video myself because I was actually behind them, and it was difficult sometimes to see their faces, but it was an amazing event. I will tell you, I attended a car drive-in one myself personally, and I was like, darn, KP did it well. So I was really proud of that. And I wish all the graduates well. I wish their families well. I hope they're all going to school soon. I hope they start acting a little more socially distant so they can get themselves to school, because they're kids and we know what that's like. But it was a great night. And I thank everyone, for anybody that participated in making it happen, from people that blew up balloons to those that gave speeches. So thank you.
And for all of you, we know that we normally invite all of you as honored guests, and it was sad for us to not have you there this year, but we thank you for understanding that. We really tried as best we could to keep the numbers as tight as possible. We had families that were asking us for extra tickets because they had extra, very close family members that they wanted or felt should be at that ceremony, and we had to ask them to just limit it to 2 this year, because even with just 2 guests, the football field was filled, absolutely filled.
There was probably almost 1,000 people with 2 guests.
Yeah. So a wonderful evening, and kudos to all of the people Dr. Mobley mentioned. I know we also, Joe Ferrero and the sound group,
Yes.
and our cable station, and Jody Greenleaf, who helped behind the scenes, and the people who put the videos together. There were just so many people. And I'm sure that Dr. Mobley and I together still missed a person or two, but it's not because we don't appreciate and have them in our heart, because like I said, they did a fantastic job, and it's much to be proud of.
And what
Well,
I didn't
the
know,
weather too, Lisa, the
the
weather.
weather cooperated.
Right.
The sunset behind the
No monsoon this time for you, Mr. G. What I didn't know was that our little production crew of Mrs. Greenleaf and this young man, Andrew, who is a former graduate, I did not know that when they were live streaming, they were actually showing all of the kids' slides.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah, we couldn't show them at graduation because you couldn't see them on that thing that we had, but they were able to do it for all the parents or family members that watched the live stream. The kids' slides came up each time they came up on stage. So I thought that was super cool, and found out that later when I took a peek at it myself.
Well, I know, Lisa, that you said you can't take any credit, but I think you should. And I think you deserve a special thanks as well for all of your efforts in this. And of course, the thank you to Mother Nature. And I think we should be thanking the town of Mansfield for thwarting the Xfinity Center plan.
Yes. Yeah. I would agree. I think this was a way better outcome doing it this way. And I'm glad we snuck it in, because I agree with Mr. Leanne that, you know, I think although our state is in a good place right now, we're keeping up just like all the other states kind of have before us. So, and Mr. Zinni was instrumental in steering me towards that date. I was thinking a different date, and he was like, oh, I think this one will be statistically the good one. And I went, okay. So thank you, Mr. Zinni, for that.
Yeah, I think it's nice that we were able to do that for the students. I think they deserved a true ceremony. So it's really nice that they got that.
And I have to say, as a parent who's gone through their children's graduations, it's about the students, but it's also about the parents. You know, for those of you who've been through it and watched your child put that cap and gown on, and knowing all the nights you struggled with homework at the kitchen table with them, and, you know, making sure they took a shower before school and getting them on the bus in the morning, to finally watch them walk across that stage and know that they accomplished it. I'll tell you, I get all teary-eyed every time I attend one of my kids' graduations. So I think the parents also were so happy to be able to have that opportunity to have that kind of once in a lifetime moment of watching their child graduate. So with that, any questions or anything for Dr. Mobley about graduation?
Mr. Zinni, do you think you need me for any of the other items, the remote plan or anything? I'm happy to stay on if you want to tag me in later, or if you're all set. I still have some scheduling to do before bed.
I would say I think we're all set, Dr. Mobley, and I certainly have your number. So I've actually got two computers going, because especially at the beginning, I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any public comments that came in at the last minute, since we said that they was right up to the time of public comment. So I can go into my other computer and I can text you really fast if we have a question and ask you to join us again.
Great, that'll work. Thank you, everyone.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Just a grant update. You want to do that before the?
That's very quick, because I think people have heard talk about that there's money out there for COVID and money to help districts to try to mitigate some of the costs that are coming in around reopening. And there has been some money that's out there, and there are a couple of different pots, and I'll certainly Larry will jump right in and help me with this. But the pots of money were not as generous to KP as they may have been to other districts that had different demographics. So one of the pools of money was $225 per student, which will bring us about close to $460,000, not quite, but pretty doggone close, or just about there, which sounds like a lot of money, but it has to be used for actual things that we need to reopen. So it can't be used for staffing issues or things like that. But when you think of all of the costs that we're incurring, from PPE to additional technology, that isn't a huge amount of money for us. There was the CARES money that came in the CARES money was designed for, to again help with that. That was early money. Larry, help me. Was it like $43,000 that we received in CARE money?
Yeah, that's the ESSER grant, ESSER.
For our early costs. And so that was, again, not a tremendous amount. Other districts, that were high need districts, a considerable amount more. There's a technology grant that we've applied for to purchase additional technology. And Dr. Gilson, who's been our primary grant writer, has been going nonstop on all of these grants. Every time we turn around, she's writing something more. This one she worked hand in hand with Mr. Boyce, but it's a matching grant. And normally we think about a matching grant as a dollar for dollar grant. We spend $100,000, they give us $100,000, and we end up at $200,000. Happy day. Or they pay for half of it. We initially lay out $100,000 and they give us back $50,000. Something on that idea. We were told with this grant that it will be, it's based on our demographics for our community. So some districts could get a 90-10 match, and some districts could get a 10-90 match. Where you spend, you get 10% back as opposed to 90% back. So we're going after as much of that technology money as possible. But again, our community is not one of the urban districts. And that grant is definitely designed to support the urban districts. And then there was some municipal CARES money that went directly to municipalities. Now, technically, regional districts are considered their own municipality, but they did not include the regionals when they did those allocations. They sent them directly to the towns. And we're hopeful that at some future point, we may be able to tap into some of the money that the towns got. But as of right now, we don't have any of those allocations. So I just wanted you to keep that or know that information as we continue to talk about budget issues and things like that. And we're talking about our reopening plans so that we always know in the back of our mind what, when they talk about additional funds to help districts, that's what we're looking at. That's the additional funds that KP received. And remembering that we're looking at a $35 million budget. So I think I described to you less than $500,000. So not a huge amount compared to our whole budget. We're grateful for whatever we get, but I just don't want people to, when they hear that there's this money out there to help districts, I don't want people to be confused that it was a significant amount. So that said, I think that blends us right into the reopening scenarios.
Paul, can I just back up for 1 second? So, because we were talking about funding, was I correct in hearing that the state has confirmed that school districts should assume level funding from the state?
So we've been getting information literally in the hour before this meeting started. So there was a newspaper article earlier in the week that talked about the state approving a 3-month budget. They were going in a 1/12 budget, but they expanded it right out to October. And then there was separate language that talked about fully funding schools. But we couldn't get clear understanding of whether that was fully funding them for 3 months or fully funding them for the year. I reached out to our representatives, and what I was understanding was it sounded like it was for a year. But we didn't have confirmation on that. So we've just gotten some documents this evening, and Larry's again on the line. I think it's looking very good, but Larry, I don't know how comfortable you are with a response at this point.
The early indications are that our Chapter 70 appears to be level funded from FY20. So if you recall, from 10 years ago in the spring when we went through the budget process, we were forecasting that the only increase we were going to get in Chapter 70 was a $30 per pupil allocation, which translated to about $61,000 for the district. But it appears that is not in what was released today. So we're still trying to dig into that because there was talk of accounting for inflation, and so it's unclear. Basically, they put out a 3-paragraph statement and a spreadsheet. So as Paul said, there's been all sorts of buzz around between superintendents and business managers, and you guys may have seen some on the school committee lists, trying to figure out what exactly this means. So it appears that our Chapter 70 is level funded, which at this point should probably be considered a good thing, considering that we were looking at scenarios of 10% cut, 20% cut, which would have been, $1.7 million. So if the only reduction we end up with is $61,000, then that's obviously a lot more palatable. But until I actually see a cherry sheet with the official numbers, I'm not gonna put anything on that. But usually those are a day or two behind the announcements. But obviously this being a unique year, that may not happen. So
I didn't
I
mean
would
to put
say,
you on the spot prematurely, but I got excited with that
that's
news.
okay. Yeah, no, it was, it's not often that when you get information that says you're going to have a $61,000 cut to your state aid that you say, oh, that's a pretty good thing. Normally you would kind of freak out about that, but again, these are different times.
Thank you.
We were both in agreement. We've been, as I said, emailing and texting back and forth for the few hours just before this call happened, trying to clarify and seeing if we could actually celebrate. So fingers crossed that it is exactly what we just described now. That would be very, very good news for the district. So with that said, I'll move on to the reopening plan or the reopening options. So please know that this is a preliminary request that the Commissioner of Education asked every district to do. And then they're looking at the request and they're going to give us feedback on those different plans. These are not binding yet. I'm going to be coming back to you to choose an option to open with. And the main reason for the initial request from the Commissioner was he was really trying to encourage districts to find a way to open in full, to get our students back to school, recognizing the social emotional component of that and the need to have our kids back in school for the education, all of those pieces that we actually heard some eloquent, public comment earlier about. But we also know that that slowly but surely we get a lot of different guidelines on different components of reopening, how to keep kids safe, what that would look like, transportation, all of those factors. And so I will tell you that we have had a group of about a dozen or so administrators and teachers working together in the library, socially distanced with masks on, and we have been working full days, a couple of days a week together. And then those who couldn't be with us, we were virtually, Zooming them or Google Hangouting them in and trying to work out every scenario possible. And obviously the first task was to look to see if we could answer the Commissioner's question, which was, if you were level service plus, which it sounds like as of today, we might be level service, or actually we would be level funded, not level service. The plus being that additional money on the side, could you open in full? And so we did a huge amount of work trying to make that happen. And the very first thing we had to do was to empty out classrooms and put desks in to see how many students we could put in there when they were socially distanced. And so based on the configurations of our classrooms, if we go, and remember the guidelines say that the students should be at least 6 feet apart, should be 6 feet apart, no less than 3 feet. So even going with the 3 foot distance between, and they're going edge of seat to edge of seat. Our best scenario would be to get about 22 desks at the middle school and about 23 desks in the average size classroom at the high school. There are a couple of science rooms that might be able to accommodate a couple more desks at the high school, and definitely some classrooms that would accommodate significantly less at the high school. Now, I'm not going to do justice to the work that Dr. Mobley did, and again, you saw a different summary in the report that I sent you, but an example of, as Dr. Mobley looked at the students' requests from the spring. So in other words, in the spring, the students get their program of studies and they choose the courses they want to take. And then that populates our classes. And we know how many sections of a certain class we need. We might need 3 honors sections of American History 1 freshman year because we have 105 kids who want to take American History 1. That's 3 sections of 35, or whatever that looks like. So when we look at that scenario, just for the history department, and look at how many classes, the number to run them, we would have more than 23 students in the room. There were 29 history classes or history department classes alone. Some of them are electives, some of them are general requirements, but 23 classes. World language was even worse, and I don't even remember the percentages of the other courses. So what does that mean? If we had right now, scheduled 2 sections of American history with 35 students apiece in them, and we can only get 23 students in the room, it means we would have to open a 3rd section of that class. So 2 things would have to happen. One, we would have to find another location when we use every classroom space in our high school already to hold that 3rd section of that class. With the current teaching, now remember, we still have approximately 9 positions that have been riffed or not, that we feel like we can't fill based on the current budget. Now, we're hoping that that's going to change with the news that we just talked about a little while ago, but as of all of the planning that goes along with this, we are still down 9 positions right now in the teaching realm, not to mention custodians, secretaries, et cetera, the teaching assistants that we haven't filled yet, retirements and resignations that we haven't filled. So 23 sections, the only way to cover those additional sections that we would have to create would be to take a teacher from the department and have them not teach something that wasn't a prerequisite to teach another section of a prerequisite instead. So we would then take our junior and senior electives, for example, psychology, sociology, ethics, AP classes at the high school level, and the teacher who would teach that section has a history license. They would now teach, instead of psychology, they would teach a section of American history. We'd need the location for it, and we would need the teachers for it. So we could cover our prerequisite classes, make sure all of our kids get the first 2 years of history that they need, or those pieces of it. But we then begin to lose something like 19 electives. So students in the spring who thought that they could take ethics, it's no longer offered because the ethics teacher is teaching American history. Now, that in itself is problematic because now we've got a student who's approaching the end of their education career who can't take courses that they've looked forward to, that they've rearranged their schedule to take. In some cases, it would mean that we couldn't allow kids to double up on math classes or take double world language classes. So you kind of saw in that report the whole list of those things that happened. But additionally, those kids were already signed up for that class. So if there were 30 students signed up for ethics and we can no longer run ethics, those students have to go someplace. They're still in our building. So we either have to try to disperse them to other electives that might not be filled yet. And when you're talking about 19, we're not talking about having a lot of spaces when you're eliminating 19 of them to fill, or they end up with studies. And so we would really end up having to create a very large study hall in one of the gymnasiums and warehouse those students for 1 period a day to rotate them out of the elective that they wanted to put them in a study hall instead, and to focus on making sure that they got the key courses that they needed. And so we're looking at a balance of safety and quality education. And to me, the second part of that is significantly sacrificed when you're eliminating that many courses that are essential to our students, graduating. Additionally, we don't have enough spaces for that. Even if we carved out places like the gymnasium and made classrooms out of them, our problem comes in that we need those spaces to feed our kids. See, the guidelines say that kids can be as close as 3 feet apart if they are masked. But when they eat, they will be unmasked. And that becomes problematic. If they are unmasked, forgive me, so I'm unmuted right now because I'm speaking, and we're getting a spam call on my home phone that you can all hear. So I apologize for the ringing in the background, and I don't know quite how to shut that all off, but then you can hear our answering machine go. But the suggestion is to have kids eat in the classroom. Now that perhaps could work in a classroom where kids stay static. But again, you're still setting up for 3 feet apart. That's to get us to the 23 desks. And now they have to be 6 feet apart to unmask. So we would have to still remove half the kids from the classroom for that lunch period and have them go someplace else. Or we could create socially distanced larger locations. So we could put, if we don't use plexiglass dividers on a round table, we could put 2 students per round table. If we don't use them, we can only, plexiglass, we could get 4 students to the table. Unplexiglass, we could get 2 students per table. And so we are trying to figure out even how to, if we go to the hybrid model, how we can actually accommodate 600 students for lunch with all of our large locations being set up for lunch and keeping them socially distanced. We can't imagine a way of doing that with all of the students in and using those giant spaces to accommodate study halls and classrooms. They either have to be a cafeteria or study halls and class. We can't do both. Even with that, we're looking at collapsing offices at the for central office and moving some of our post-secondary classes to the central office area and using the classrooms there that were formerly office spaces and bringing them down to provide extra space at the high school. We've looked at every space possible to try to make that happen. It just physically doesn't work. We get much closer at the middle school because our average class size there was around 26. So to make it work at the middle school, what we would have to do is to create a 7th team. So you know we have right now 3 7th grade teams, 3 8th grade teams, each consisting of a core teacher. At the 8th grade, we add in the world language, and then they all get their elective courses, their art, music, health, courses such as that. We would have to create a 7th team at that point to take the overflow. So instead of having 26 kids per class and 5 classes per team, we would have to basically skim off 4 students from each of those classes and create additional 7th grade classes and additional 8th grade classes. And then we would have to create a split 7th, 8th grade team. So the teachers would be asked to teach a couple of 7th grade sections and a couple of 8th grade sections. To staff that, we would have to use, again, existing staff. So we would then have to go to the support classes that our students participate in, such as STEM and those other courses where the teachers have a license in a content area, and not offer that elective class so that we could use those teachers to offer the extra sections of the team. And again, we're still facing the problems about that would be with 3 feet distance in the classroom. And we're still facing the problems of, the unmasking for lunch, the cafeteria. So the students would virtually lose any electives because what we'd have to do is to fill those times because those teachers wouldn't be available to offer STEM. Our middle school students would end up with a whole slew of studies as well because there would be no one to teach those courses. So we worked with, we spent days playing with different configurations and asking the custodians to reconfigure the classrooms, to move the desks around. We did that by taking every last piece of furniture out of the room. So when we configure those rooms, there were literally students' desks, a teacher's desk, no file cabinets, no bookshelves, nothing else. So that's why you see what you see as far as the description of the problems that we face with a full return. Now, the hybrid would be a much more realistic way of getting students back into the school, half at a time.
Hey, Paul,
Yes.
just to give yourself a chance to take a breath, maybe we can talk about the in-person model here for a minute. We talked, I know we're going to get to the hybrid and we already started asking a lot of questions about that. Obviously a lot of work on the in-person model. I just want to make sure we discuss this as a committee because this is tremendously disappointing. And I know you feel that way too, and I know everybody else feels that way. I'd like to hear from Erin. I know the elementary is a very different situation, but how are they doing it there? And then go back to what the real constraints are. I mean, it just keeps circling back to the constraint being 3 feet distance.
That wouldn't be the only constraint, but go ahead with Erin first. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
There's busing and there's other things.
I mean,
and then-
it's just a completely different animal, Trevor. I mean, these kids don't move from class to class in the elementary school the way they do in the middle and high school.
So you're just spreading them out and using more space.
They just fit. They're able to, the class sizes are smaller, you know, in Rentham, there are about 20 kids per class. And when you take all the excess furniture out and it's just desks, they're able to get all the kids in the classroom with the teacher. So really the only challenge to the in-person model that they're trying to work out, right? I mean, there's a lot of challenges, right? I'm not going to say, oh, easy as pie. It's not easy as pie. I mean, it's a lot of work and logistics to get to the point of being able to get the kids in person, but the challenges are different than what we're facing here at KP. Lunch is still an issue, but you know, there's potentially large spaces that we can use, similar to, you know, what Paul had suggested, to be able to accomplish that. And you know, how to deal with specials, moving the kids, because that's when they do move, when they go to their special, you know, art, music, health, you know, they go from place to place within the school. So trying to keep the kids distance. I think one of the biggest challenges at the elementary school level is how do you keep masks on a kindergartner? Do you know what I mean? It's just a completely different conversation, to be honest.
Okay, thank you. What are we hearing, Paul, from other districts?
You read my mind, Trevor. So I was just a ding on my other computer because the Hawk superintendents have been posting on there. What I will tell you is districts are all looking at best hybrid for their upper grades. There are some districts that are saying they're going to just keep a consistent model throughout. But anyone I've heard that said that they can go back in full, the only places that they've said they can do it are at the elementary level. And it's only in districts where they have smaller class sizes and large classrooms.
And then last question I'd throw out at you, and again, if you haven't gotten to this yet, or if it's in there and I missed it, but as part of our response, this first wave, as you clarified, this is, you know, just a draft, and then we're gonna have a couple of rounds of this, of course. Are we able to identify, you know, solutions to the problem, i.e. if this constraint or this constraint or this constraint was lessened or removed, it would allow us to open in person, even if there are constraints that are unpopular, so that we're at least identifying, hey, you want in person, this is what it's going to take. For example, no social distancing on buses, or everyone's got to figure out their own transportation, or whatever it may be.
So we kind of touch upon those in the response that I gave you. So the kind of the first section of what's going back to the Department of Education is, if not full, why? And so the flip of that is you'd have to fix all those things to be able to do it. So you'd need that many additional staff members. You either need to get rid of the social distancing. If students could sit, if we could put the desks back in the classroom the way they're normally configured, and we could put teachers in those rooms safely,
right? Then
there's problem solved.
Masks on, no social distance for kids.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen at all. There's been nothing anywhere that's talking about that it's still safe enough to be next to people. The masks are the best strategy to keep people safe, but they are coupled with other strategies, and that is also keeping distance from each other as well, because masks are not 100% effective. And there are a lot of other issues that go along with masks that we have to watch for. For example, just the use of masks. So when you and I are having a conversation and we're both using masks, any droplets that come from you are being caught inside your mask, or most of them are. But whatever droplets that are in the air, the outside of my mask catches those. Pay attention to friends and family and colleagues that you have who are wearing masks, and when they get far enough apart from each other, they're lowering their masks, and watch the kinds of things that people do. They touch their mask and they lower it. They move it back up. Are people removing their masks by their fingers in their ears, or are they touching the cloth or the mask part of it in many cases, adjusting it just because it's sliding down their nose? When they do, they're then transferring that virus, if it's in the droplet, onto their hand. As soon as they touch their mask, are they sanitizing their hand every time that they touch their mask? And it goes on and on as far as all of those pieces go. And so that's a problem. We're also talking about the fact that younger children, when a teacher firmly tells them, and a principal maybe reinforces for a straggler or two, you will wear your mask, we have less resistance than sometimes stronger-willed middle and high school students. While 95% of our students on any given day follow all the rules and are wonderfully behaved, even 5% at the high school of 1,300 kids is a lot of kids that we may be chasing around who are not wearing their masks or getting too physically close, or we're seeing that escalation right now in the summertime. I think that's already an example of why we as a staff are worried, because we're seeing students in the communities, young adults in the communities that are feeling a little bit more comfortable because it's summertime and the state's going in the right direction and they're not being as cautious. So those are all factors. Other issues, Trevor, that we're also thinking about, travel in the hall, right? At the middle school, we're going to keep the kids in one room all day and the teachers will move classrooms. So the students, if you're going to be with this cluster of students, you're going to sit at this desk all day. We'll let you stand between periods and stretch, but then the next teacher will come in and you will stay pretty much confined in your room so we can keep you contained. At the high school, because as I said, I have 1,300 kids with individual schedules. Even at half attendance, I've got 600 kids in my school, all with different schedules. When the bell rings, I've got 600 kids in the hall passing to another room. So our next level of conversations is how to safely move students from one classroom to another. Part of that looks like one-way hallways, maybe staggered dismissals. We have arrival and dismissal of buses. We have 24 buses that we use to transport kids. We're at 30 to 40% capacity. If we come back in full, we would need to probably double the fleet, even if families were willing to transport their kids. And as a regional, right now we're required to transport all of our students. You're sitting staggered, every other student in a seat. Now, 18 of for example, the middle school, 18 of those buses go up to the middle school, 10 buses overlap. 18 go up to the middle school in the morning, the bell rings, and they all get off the bus at the same time and go into the building.
Jim, can you mute, please?
Yeah, I have a question, if I may.
By all means.
Paul, having read your report today, and I think you've done a very good job of looking at all the different scenarios and concerns. I think that what you're dealing with is the reality of behavior. And there's only so much you can do to control that behavior. And I'm the eternal optimist, so I'm very hopeful that come the first of the year, we're looking at an entirely different scenario where we can get a little bit somewhat back to normal. So we're focusing on a 4-month scenario under the best case scenario. And I, for one, am an advocate of being as cautious and careful as you can to prevent people from becoming ill with this virus. And I think your scenarios that you've laid out do the very best that we possibly can. I have 2 daughters and 6 grandkids in your system. So I'm getting an earful of opinions as to what they'd like to see happen, not to mention their friends, cousins, and uncles and neighbors, as I'm sure all of you are. But I do look at this as a potentially 4-month issue that we need to deal with, if we're fortunate. And I say that with optimism, that if we're fortunate. And I am very inclined to hopefully think that we will continue to be very cautious. And as much as I'd like to see all those kids, the social interaction is critical to the development. It's critical to their school learning. All of that we know and understand. I've got one grandson that's on the soccer team that may or may not have his season. All of these things are critical to our kids, but nothing is more critical than their health. And the health of the people they come in contact with. And so I know I'm saying what you all believe, but I want to keep that as our primary focus, at least from my perspective, that we do the very best we can to keep our community as safe as we can and still find a way to help increase the opportunities for our students to learn in a normal environment. And I think your scenarios have played that out fairly well. I don't see any way you're going to get back to any kind of normal interaction with these kids between now and hopefully January. But I did want to say that I'm very concerned about health in this. They all come home to students. It's my understanding that about 1/3 of our teachers have underlying medical conditions.
Well, because of HIPAA laws, we
That's a
can't-
national statistic. That 1/3 of the teaching population have underlying health conditions, and half of them don't know they have it.
That's an interesting stat.
We have to keep this as an awareness in our discussions, that we are still in an issue that we cannot control. We still have issues that we cannot understand, nor do we know how good or bad they may become. And I don't want to lose that health consideration in the well-being of our communities in this conversation. So I will go on mute. You're probably all wishing I was on mute longer.
Absolutely not, Jim. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate everybody's comments. And I kind of equate this to I call it the Goldilocks syndrome. You know, when you put out something that's controversial and people have very strong opinions, what you end up with some who think it's too hot, some who think it's too cold, and you hope that most think it's just right. And so I've heard from both ends of the spectrum already. I've heard from parents who are very, very worried about their children and can't imagine that we would think of opening school in the fall. And in fact, our first, the first survey that we sent out to parents asking would they be inclined to send their children back, 19% of them said that they want, as of this time, their choice would be to keep their children home and to continue them with virtual learning. Now, when we get closer to the actual start date, that may change dramatically. But then there are other families who have passionately talked about how important it is to get our students back in school, to engage in the high standards of learning, the social interaction, the connections, and all of that goes along with it. And I agree with all of it. And I guess I would say two things. If you tell me that you have a niece or someone who's struggling with reading and you're asking me for some advice, I feel really comfortable being able to sit down with you and help you and give you a lot of strategies. When you're asking me how to keep kids safe from a virus, I'm relying on experts from a lot of fields, including our boards of health. And I'm talking 2 or 3 times a week with representatives of our board of health. They will be, checking through our plans with a fine-tooth comb to make sure that we haven't missed anything along the way to keep our students safe. And I will say to you that in the end, if someone is going to be concerned with the decisions I make, and these are your decisions as well, but the decisions I make, I would rather them fault me for being too cautious and keeping kids in an effort to keep kids safe than to go in the other direction and to have the worst happen. But again, we're dealing with so many unknowns. It's staggering right now, and we're trying to, as we say, answer some of them. The good news is we may have some answers to some of our budget questions that will help in some of the next steps of planning tremendously. We're getting more guidance from the state that will help us tremendously. So do you have other thoughts about the full, at this point, things I can answer, questions?
Yeah, just one quick question, Paul, from me, if I could ask. And it may have already been talked about, but I might have missed it, and I apologize. The scenario of possibly, helping with class size and all of this stuff. What about, I know at Avon you had to use trailers at times, has that ever been a consideration that might help alleviate the issue? And how would it have been handled?
So you'd have to either purchase or lease them. Actually, many years ago, one of my earliest hats, I was a Title I director in Taunton, and Title I actually paid for 6 of those structures at various schools as extra classroom space. And so I was responsible for making sure they got maintained, and they had to be parked, and they had to be on blocks, and you had to have all kinds of things that go along with them. So we would have to either lease them or purchase them. We would have to find a location for them. We would have to be moving students in and out of them. But there's a significant cost that's involved with that. And it's certainly something that I would be very willing to explore, especially if that's the direction that you tell me you'd like to. But I would say that it's worth exploring more if it were the only issue preventing us from bringing kids back. If I were able to find the extra spaces to accommodate every extra class I had to create, I still need the teachers to teach those classes. And I can move teachers to teach those classes, but I drop all the electives or the extra the support classes. And in the process, I create a massive list of studies for kids during the course of the day. unless we had a significant additional dollars where we could add somewhere between 7 and 10 teachers to our teaching force to accommodate those extra courses that we had to create.
I was just trying to think of, and I'm sure you guys have painted probably more scenarios that you care to talk about, but it's one of those scenarios that it crossed my mind. I didn't think I heard it, so I thought I would ask. And
yeah, you hadn't heard it, but it was one that we certainly explored. I even know where on like the high school grounds I would think first to put them. But again, the middle school, we could carve out the space. The middle school is not as much about the space because the teachers we would have to reassign already have classroom spaces. So the middle school spacing issue is not as bad. And again, remember the whole central office is in the middle school. It's the high school. And so we were already looking at any classes that we can effectively move from the high school to the middle school. We're doing those. And, next fall, Dr. Gilson and I may be sharing our office together, or it might be Larry and I, but we'll be doubling up and sharing offices to make room for those classes to come in. We're actually starting to talk about that today, what that might look like. So we have looked at every nook and cranny, if you will, to try to carve out spaces on that, including our big areas like in front of the auditorium and the bus loop, where down the other end near the field house. Can we put tables there and maybe have extra lunch spaces there, things like that. So
Paul, with the hybrid model, that does save the electives or save some of them?
It would save. So what we would do is we would build a 6-period day at the middle school. Now this is the plan that we have that we've fleshed out right now. We're going to need to then try to populate everything, and we could find more problems somewhere down the road, but this is what we've got to this point. At the middle school, you normally had a 7-period day. The teachers taught 5. They had a duty period and a planning period. We would move to a 6-period day of 50 minutes, and that the extra time that was spent out in the day would be used before and after school for arrival and dismissal, larger passing times, a mask break, some things like that. And rather than the teachers having a duty period, they would have duties, duties throughout the day to monitor those situations. And so the kids would lose their SAT period, kind of a directed study period, but they would have 6 periods during the course of the day, and they would stay primarily in the same place. So in the 8th grade, they have 5 cores: science, social studies, math, and math and English, and world language. And then they would get 1 elective: health, music, something would rotate through. We can't even, with this model, guarantee that every student would get every subject, but they would get 3 specials. We do trimesters that get a different special each trimester for the year, okay? At the 7th grade level, we would have the 4 cores, because they don't have world language yet, and they would get 2 electives rotated through. And they would have their 6-period day. At the high school, to accommodate the number of students and to get the number of sections that we need for students, we have to go to a 7-period day. And so the 7-period day would be 47-minute periods. And the students would have a 7-period schedule. They probably would still have 1 study period, but they would at least get 6 of their choices throughout the day. And they would have to move from room to room, where in the middle school, the teachers would move during those rooms. In a hybrid model, you would still have that same 6-period or 7-period day. So let me step back for a moment. If we were to go full, if Jim's scenario is correct and 4 months later there's a vaccination and we feel like we can bring everyone back to school, that model could stay to the end of the year and it can go in full. 6 periods in the middle school, 7 periods in the high school. We can make some adjustments very smoothly. Hybrid, it would be that same 6-7 model. And if we go completely remote, it would be that same 6-7 period model. They would have those classes carved out and they would log into every one of those classes every day, whether they are in school or home. In the hybrid model, the teacher would have half of the students in front of them and half at home. So A would be in front of them, B would be at home, and then they would flip-flop. They would do a similar lesson for those same 2 days. They would do an in-person lesson with the A group in front of them, and then that same in-person lesson for the B group, and the at-home lesson would flip-flop. So they'd have to have 2 lessons prepared, one completely, they would check in with the student, and then the student would work from home, but the student would still be following that, that day. They would have to check in the morning. They would have a check-in time in the middle of the day to check in with their teachers, and they would have to turn in those assignments at the end of the day in the hybrid. And they would have that connection with the teacher, and they would be structuring their day because everything would have to be get done within that time period. And then there would be that flip-flop. They'd have the virtual day in the middle where the teacher would check in with each one of them, and then they would have another A/B day. Fully remote.
Paul, one of the other issues is your staffing. All of these models are based on their staffing remaining as consistent as you currently have them. What happens if some of your teachers don't want to return?
So that's a conversation that we're still trying to unpack. We have thoughts. We are going to be reaching out to staff very soon to try to get a handle on who we hope to know will be back and who we're planning otherwise. We always do have a subline, if you will, for our long-term. A teacher gets ill, a teacher goes out on parental leave or something like that, and so we have that that set aside. So in some cases, we might have to bring in a sub for a certain teacher who has to stay remote. What we're looking at this point, and we still need a lot more information. We think theoretically it can work. It's going to take a lot more work to play this out. But right now, what we're looking at is that we would probably be able to get subs to cover the teachers who were out. And then the teachers who are out would then become our remote academy. So remember, we said that parents had the right to keep their children home at this point in time if they didn't feel it was safe for them to go back. And remember, I said we were looking at about 19%. So Jim, you're a licensed history teacher. And so you may, if you were to come back to school, your class might be 3 American histories, a world history, and a psychology class. Now you're teaching remotely. You're going to be responsible for these 15 kids and making sure that they get whatever history class they need. This is all theoretical right now. We still have to work through this. You're getting the early stages of where our thinking is. Again, every time we think we solved the problem, we discover 3 new ones, and we're back to the drawing board again. But this is our best plan to date. So as I said, we would be creating this at-home academy, utilizing the teachers who had to stay home and accommodating the students who had to stay home. It might limit a little bit some of the electives that some of our at-home students could take. But again, our licenses are broad, so we're hoping that we could cover all of the core courses that our students need that way. And then we would have to make up the in-school stuff with substitutes. We might also have to explore the option of maybe asking a teacher who would be able to virtually teach from home into a classroom. So that might mean perhaps a teacher assistant might be working in the class. And these are all hypothetical. These are not confirmed. I just don't want parents who are home thinking that this is the plan, or even teachers who may be hearing this for the first time to think this is the plan. This is our best guess today. I really need to preface that. But we might have, Bruce in the classroom as our teaching assistant. He'd be there taking attendance, making sure all the students were all set, and passing out any assignments and things that need to be done, collecting anything, and making sure that he then links in to Mrs. Jones, who's home, who has to work remotely, but is able to remote into her students for the period. We don't know how that would work, but it's an idea that we have that we're floating, but we won't be able to actually map that out more completely until we get a real clear feel for who's able to come back, who is likely not coming back, and closer to a final count of what students are staying home and what grades they're in and what their course selections look like. But that's where we're at right now.
So I suggest we talk about next steps because we are going to revisit this, right? And so this plan you're turning in tomorrow, right? This preliminary plan.
Correct.
And then, so then the final plan, which I believe we need to vote on, is due on the 10th. We do have a meeting set up on the 10th, but you are planning to do some public presentations next week, and I'm going to suggest that we add a school committee meeting, a brief one after one of those, so we can have a preview of, or discuss the plan before we have to take a final vote on it.
So yes, we've been trying to do some meetings with parents. We've tried to send some, the principals have continued to send newsletters home. Last week, I participated with Dr. Mobley in a town hall for high school families. We had about 300 that participated. And then this Tuesday night, myself, Ms. Cruiser, and Mr. Al's, our admin team at the middle school, did a town hall, and we had, when I looked down at the number, I saw 289 at one point. I'm not sure if it got higher than that, but I know 289 were logged in at least at one point to a town hall, and that ran for about an hour and a half, where we were doing our best to get input from parents. They were sharing with us, the kinds of things that we heard tonight. I really want my child back in full. I really want, this is what my concerns are. And then we tried to answer as many questions as we possibly could for them with what we knew at that point. Now that we've kind of cemented these three potential options, I'd like to have another town hall for both buildings next week. So I would do one on Wednesday night, one on Thursday night, and then I would suggest that you could, you've heard this presentation, you could, go with that, or you could opt to even log into one or both of those town meetings and hear what's going on those. And then after the second one, that Thursday night, if we run those both like at 6:30, perhaps we could have a brief meeting at 8 o'clock where you could ask me any additional questions or share any additional thoughts. Your thinking might change based on what you heard come into the chat or the questions from those families. And then we'd have a better idea of where we were going for that final plan. And then I would have it ready for you to vote on Monday evening, because it's due on the 10th, you're meeting on the 10th, and then I could just hit send after the meeting is over.
We're talking Thursday, August 6th at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Something like that, yeah. A brief meeting just focused on that.
Yeah, I can make that work.
And again, that would not be an action item meeting. That would be a discussion for you to, after hearing all the parent input and kind of chewing a little bit on what we talked about tonight, coming back and having a chance to talk things through again and ask more questions, and then just kind of giving me some guide. I would then have that guidance from you as, okay, we talked about hybrid looking like this, but based on what we heard next week when we heard from parents and the conversation afterwards, I might have to go back and make these adjustments. And then on Monday night would be the action item. So
You said Wednesday was middle school and Thursday was high school?
I didn't assign, but I can absolutely do that. That would
whichever, but both nights.
I would rather do, before I committed, is to double check with the administrators to make sure, that's not a one night that they could make and another night they can't. They both have families as well. I would want to be respectful to them, but I would schedule one night and one the other night. It's going to be the same basic presentation of this is the three models that we're looking at, and then letting people put into the chat. But obviously, you can imagine that there's different questions for the middle school versus the high school.
Any objections to posting a meeting for 8 o'clock on Thursday? Okay.
No. Paul, can I just ask a question? Sorry, I don't mean to take a step backwards, everybody, but I just want to clarify for myself about how this hybrid plan would look, or even the remote, 100% remote plan for that matter. Are we talking about the students that are at home? Are they going to be having like a live stream into the classrooms where the other cohort is in person? Is it, or is that off the table? Is there anything off the table as far as how the at-home kids? I mean, I don't know what the teachers unions have.
I don't want to say off the table, and I want to be very clear, because there's been a lot of media out there,
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, we have had some incredibly productive meetings working. It's not administration teachers; it's a team of people coming together and brainstorming. And there are a lot of people who have preferences around one model or another. And I will tell you that we've had very long, detailed conversations of the pros of all the different models and the cons. And they all have cons. And so in the end, there was consensus about where we felt would be best. And so what I could describe to you a little bit more detail as how we envision it now. Again, we're going to continue to work on this. And especially when we get back and we have those professional development days, we may get some very strong feedback from the staff who are there with us, as they're starting to try to practice and design lessons that they might want to tweak this a little bit, but based on what we've got right now, what the full remote would look like would be they would follow the same schedule as if they were hybrid. But it would be every day they would be logged in. So that their first class would start at 7:30, run to 8:15. They would log in that period through the Google tool with their class. The teacher would interact with them in some capacity. They would be engaged in that subject for the whole period with the teacher logged into that Google meeting, and then they would move on, have a 5-minute break and move on to their next class. That does not necessarily mean that the teacher would have the screen facing me for that whole time and I would be lecturing you for that time. I might have a discussion with you for maybe 15 minutes. I might ask you to watch a YouTube video about a historical event, and then I might break you into technology partners and have you buddy up and do a pro-con on what you just saw and a debate. There are a huge number of things that we can do with the rooms and stuff, but they would be engaged that whole period.
Okay.
We'll move on to the next one. It gets complicated with the hybrid because if I'm in front of 15 students, especially the high school with people with devices and things, and I've got 15 at home that I'm trying to keep engaged, when we weighed all the pros and cons, the end suggestion was that we would make sure that every student logged in first thing in the morning. We would take school attendance. They're up, they're in, it's 7:30, their computers are on. And then they would have expectations for each of those subjects. At lunchtime, the way it's built in, the teachers have like about a 25-minute block that parallels their lunch. So 25 minutes of lunch, 25 minutes of like this block of time. That time would be used as office time. That would be when they can check in with their students. Their students could be asking them questions. You wanted me to work on this, but I'm having trouble with that. Can you answer this for me? So it would be direct office time. And then we haven't worked out the time of day, but there would be a time at the end of the day when all students would have to have whatever products they were producing, and it wouldn't always be a product, but whatever products that were produced that day for that teacher would have to be logged in at the end of the day so the teacher could verify that they had been working throughout the day. And we would expect that there would be approximately an hour's worth of work assigned for each class that they have a teacher assigned. So each teacher would be assigning an hour's worth of work for that remote time. So they wouldn't get, so I wouldn't say they would get 7 hours worth of work at the high school because they might have a study period. And I'm looking at an expression that I might not be explaining that well, but if I'm the first period English teacher, I know that if the B group is remote, they've got a robust project that's encouraging new learning and working on the standards, gradable assignment, not just pass fail, a gradable assignment that will be a minimum of an hour's worth of time that the student would be engaged in that learning. It could be watching a 15-minute video and responding to it with a 3-paragraph essay. It could be lots of different things, but the amount of time it would take for me to do the work or the assignment that I gave that student would be about an hour. And then the students would have their other classes throughout the day that way. And again, we wanted to make sure that students had the option of checking in with their teachers because there's nothing worse than going home with a homework assignment and thinking I understood it and then getting home and I can't do it. So they need to be able to have a time during the day to check in, but if the teacher's engaged in front of the class with the other students, it can't be necessarily at the direct moment, but that lunch block would be the time that the teacher would have office hours. They would be checking their emails, checking their Google chats, and making sure that all students are on task and engaged, and then they can correspond with them. And then there would be that end of the day check-in when that's turned back in.
Okay.
And that seems to be the best scenario we could come up with at this point.
So not to confuse things further, but this is kind of confusing. For the students who opt out of the hybrid and want to be 100% at home, working remotely, is that looks completely different? You mentioned something about there being like a remote student team of teachers dealing with that potentially. I get concerned when I think of this hybrid model for that group of students, because for the kids that are in the hybrid model, the remote learning is fine because they're going to be having those 2 days where they're actually seeing people in the building. But for the kids that have opted to be home 100% of the time, I would worry that they're just going to be folded in and treated like the at-home hybrid kids, because it sounds like there's really not a lot of interaction in that model when they're home.
When they're home full time, remember, that's what we talked about, that at-home academy.
Yes, so right.
Right. So they would have a direct.
So it looks completely different for those kids. It's complete. Okay.
Developed yet. And
Thank you.
I'm careful because you're asking excellent questions and I'm trying very hard to answer them, but I have to share with you that
it's not all pinned down. I know. I just think it's important to at least pick your brain on what you think it might look like right now, because if we're going to be asking the community to make a choice, are you going to send your kids back full time or not? I think it's important that they understand loosely what that will look like for their students, so they know what they're choosing, I guess.
Right. Again, like I said, it sounds like we're giving you just a shell right now, but and there are other administrators on this meeting with me. I think they can attest to the fact that it took hours and hours and hours to put this together. And in some cases, we thought we had a tremendous plan in place. And then all of a sudden somebody said, well, wait a minute. And they mapped it out. We had one idea, and I won't even get into it because it's thrown off the table. But we had an idea that we were really excited about at one point. And then when we actually mapped out the periods, there was this, oh darn moment. It wasn't exactly that kind of moment. And we realized we couldn't make it work. And, Dr. Mobley had spent hours running scenarios. We had been, working on it and talking about it and really, thought we were there, and we were back to square one again. And
it's a lot of moving parts. Yeah. I know you guys have been working tirelessly on this, and I'm not trying to pin you down to any specific thing. And I know you're building the plan in the air, but again, I just thought it was important to get kind of a rough idea of what you're thinking right now, because I'm thinking it's going to be pretty soon where you have to nail families down. Which one are you going to choose? And we only have another 6 weeks or so before, September 16th rolls around. So.
Yeah, and like I said, I agree with you completely, Erin. And then I'm also struggling because we're not positive of things. I'm so afraid that when I say something publicly, you heard it with me live. But what's happening is then somebody was not on this meeting, and they heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody. And all of a sudden, then people think that we have a plan that hasn't been finalized yet, hasn't been vetted, and we have to change it dramatically. And so that's why I'm
I think we've issued enough caveat language in this meeting.
I'm gonna suggest, unless this is obviously why we met for this, but with it, just looking at the time, I think, is it okay to move on at this point?
Yeah.
I think we've exhausted
Sorry,
this.
guys.
Thanks for all the good work. Thanks for all the good work, Paul.
Right.
Thanks to go to me. They go to a phenomenal administrative team and a phenomenal group of teachers who really always had the best interest of our students, their safety and their education in mind. And like I said, I'm confident that when we open, we'll be there. It's just going to be a lot more work before we get there. And so I have to thank all of them. They have been absolutely tremendous. And I'm so fortunate to be working with them.
So this is great work. And before we move on, I do have one quick question, if you don't mind. I know we want to keep this moving and move on. But is there any scenario where we have certain high need students that are in school all the time? And I believe that is in the plan.
Yes.
The 504 plans, the IEPs, the ELL, maybe the high need students. So I would like to make sure that cohort of students are addressed and accommodated.
Yeah, that's in there.
Absolutely. It's the last section in the plan that we presented, and there are different models for that. The IEP drives instruction. And, we're very fortunate that, we have the admin team. Also, a lot of them have experience with special education, but having been a special ed director for 12 years myself and a special ed teacher, and having, Ms. Moy in all of these discussions, and I remind you, I'm married to a sped director. So we have absolutely been looking at these and looking at the guidance that has come out and paying attention to that as well. So
I just want to make sure, I know it's in the plan. I see that in the plan. I just wanted to make sure that that was said out loud on the meeting.
Thank you. Good point. Okay, I'm going to move on to the FY21 budget update and vote. I know Larry gave us some background in the aborted meeting. Do we need to reiterate that background information now, folks? But you can give kind of maybe an overview, Larry, just of what we're doing here while I pull up the motion.
Sure. So as you recall, in March, the school committee adopted a budget of $36.5 million, which for was a level service budget, and it was an increase of 3.49% to the operating budget. Ultimately, at the town meetings, all three towns approved a budget that was only a 2.5% increase to the operating budget. So that represents a reduction of $332,561. We made those reductions in the areas of legal services, technology by pre-purchasing some items in FY20 from savings due to the closure, some surplus in the athletics revolving account because we budgeted for spring sports last year but didn't have them. And then a special education teacher and 2 teacher assistants that were in the original budget, but due to all the changes and configurations, will not be needed. So with that, we recommend you adopt an FY21 total budget, including debt service, of $36,177,679 with the following assessments. Norfolk, $9,462,595. Plainville, $6,616,884. And Rentham, $11,245,600. And as a reminder, per state regulations, we need 6 affirmative votes. So only count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
7 of us, yep.
8. 8, 7 or 8?
I think there's 7 of us, yep.
Okay. So happy to take any questions.
8, yeah.
There's 8 of us.
Yeah, so, oh, there are, okay. Oh, that's right. Sorry. All right, it's getting late. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved, Trevor Knott.
Okay, is there a
I'll
second?
second. Aaron DeStefano.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan? You're on mute, but okay, you got it. That's right, Aaron DeStefano.
Jim Lehan, aye.
Okay, great. Aaron?
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce Kate's aye.
Michelle?
Shop aye.
Trevor?
Trevor Knott, aye.
Jim? Killian?
Jim Killian, aye.
Ahmad?
Mod Khan, aye.
Okay. Now, finally, I believe we have this discussion. Let's put this on as kind of an FYI.
The handbook?
What? Oh, I skipped the handbook.
Yeah, the district student
Sorry,
handbook.
I knew I was going to do that. Yes, we need to, a motion to approve the district handbook, second reading.
Trevor Knott, so moved.
Second?
Aaron DeStefano, I'll second.
Okay, any discussion?
Mr. G, could we do this as a final approval or does it need to be just a second read?
I didn't know, is this a pre-reading thing? I
don't think it's a pre-read. I would think that, I know that, I see that it's listed as a second read, but I'm actually thinking it could actually be.
Let's vote it.
No, this is second reading, but it's the final.
Final vote.
So, yeah, is there any discussion? Hearing none. Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan?
Jim Lehan, aye.
Aaron?
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Bruce?
Bruce Kate's aye.
Michelle? And Michelle, is that?
So can you hear us? We need your vote for the handbook.
Okay, thumbs up, Trevor,
Trevor, not aye.
Killian,
Jim Killian, aye.
Mod.
Mod Khan, aye.
Okay, we did thank you for making sure I didn't skip over that one.
And thank you to all the assistant principals once again. I just need to commend them one more time. They did a phenomenal job. Worked with Ms. Moy and worked with the principal. Dr. Gilson was involved with that. Just a phenomenal group, and they did an excellent job. So thanks to all of them.
Okay, great. So do you want to tee up the
It appears that I think, you know, Michael and I had a conversation as we were trying to prepare the agenda, and it appears that it sparked quite a bit of conversation, which may mean that, you know, it bears some further attention. But the reason why we had simply put this on the agenda was because in the span of about a week and a half, our local paper had printed a number of different articles making reference specifically to the state legislation that's now being considered regarding mascots, and specifically is mentioning King Philip and King Philip's name and mascot. I've been consistently contacted, and as has Michael has been our athletic director, for comments on this. And we've been somewhat general on this. We just know that this is something that has come around many times over the years. I've only been here 2 years, but it's something that's come around on more than one occasion. And it's clear from the emails I've been receiving, it's clear that we had a couple of people who were passionate and wanted to make a statement this evening, that people have deep feelings about this. And so I think, the feeling that we had was that if people have deep feelings about it, it certainly should be something that the school committee continues to keep thought about. And I would certainly say that we have a lot on our plates right now to make sure that the schools are open. But if this is something that's important to the committee, we also don't want to lose the important because of the urgent. So that's why, Mike, I think, when we talked about adding it to the agenda, it was just to kind of point out to the committee that there was a lot of conversation in the community about this. There was momentum at the state level, and that, enough that it's drawing media attention. And so was there a next step, or starting to think about something for the fall, creating a committee, something like that, that you wanted to consider at this time? And that was the sole purpose of putting it on there. I don't think we were expecting to make any kind of recommendations or any kind of vote at this point. It was simply to point out to the committee that there's attention to this right now. Michael, did I explain that okay?
No, yeah, indeed. I mean, as folks may know, this legislation has periodically been introduced around this time for many years. I think everyone would recognize is that 2020 is different from previous years. So in a lot of ways, and I think that, we're on an ongoing journey, and things like this require periodic evaluation. And from my mind, it's we have to deal with the back to school issue. I mean, that's sort of the priority of the administration, but I think that I wanted to give the put it on the agenda, get folks' feelings about what we might do down the road. Again, not necessarily get into all discussion now, but kind of indicate it'll likely come back up on an agenda. This is my opinion, as to whether we should be looking at this. Now, it may be that if legislation occurs, we might have to deal with that from that side of things, right? The question is whether we also want to be talking about it proactively. So that's my thought. I don't know if there's other thoughts at this point, or whether we can move on.
No, I mean, Michael, I agree with you. I mean, it's obviously good to talk about because it has, as you guys said, is come up in the papers and the local papers, and all it takes is one bad story to get out there, and next thing you know, a hornet's nest has been poked with many, many different opinions buzzing around. So, you how I feel on it. I think it's worth, just talking about, so we're aware of it and ahead of it. But I think it's a very low hanging fruit item that really is not. There's not a lot of priority to it. I think right now because we've got to deal with reopening the school at all costs, and I think our focus should be on that. But I really don't see a lot of main points that require any type further action out of us by any means. I think we should maintain the course that we're currently under, and we've already, as you said, we have revisited this a few times. We've even, I can't remember the year or when we've had a committee put together to, and it's, I can't, Paul, I apologize. I can't remember if it was under your watch or Dr. Liz's watch that we had a committee put together and go talk to the community and the parties involved that were sensitive to our, our school name or mascot or any of that stuff. So, I think we had a pretty favorable discussion with them, if I'm not mistaken. And maybe you can add something to that. I don't recall, but anyway, that's my opinion for now. It's no reason to really say any more on that.
Jim, I would say that anything that was done done before my time.
I thought so.
Yeah, I would add that this was a topic of discussion when I was on the school committee back in the early 90s. And I think it'll be a conversation forever until someone decides that they're going to make a change. But I agree with Jim. I think right now our priorities need to stay focused on getting the schools reopened, dealing with the issues that we're dealing with. I do think that we need to pay attention to people's concerns on this, but it's not something that I personally think right now we need to focus our energy on. So I support Jim's comments.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's an ongoing journey, and I think we just need to be attuned to that, and I think some of it may be just discussing what we already have been doing to ensure that we're sort of addressing things with honor and respect, which I think we do. I mean, I think, so there's something, but that's not to say that's the be all and the end all. So,
yeah, I agree with what everyone said. It's definitely an important topic. I don't want to downplay it by any means. I think that, it's sensitive. And I think in this day and age, with everything going on in the world, it's important to have these dialogues. But like everyone else has said, I think that, with COVID, it kind of trumps all right now. We need to get these kids back to school and figure out the best way to do that. And that has to be where all our focus is.
Yeah, if I could just add one other thought on this, because, we are in a particular issue in society right now where everything seems to be polarized. And it's hard to have a reasonable, rational discussion with differing points of view and everyone listening to those points of view. And this is the type of issue right now where people are very emotional about this. And there are a lot of folks that have longstanding traditions with its name that would be very upset if we left, and others that feel very strongly the other way. So when the time does come to have this, I'm hoping that at some point in time we get back to some element of being able to communicate our differences and views in a reasonable manner, where we can come to some kind of reasonable decision. And I don't think that time is right now. We're too entrenched in polarized views. So this is a discussion I would like to defer.
Jim, that's an excellent point. Not only because of the need to open schools and focus on educating kids, but as a society and even as communities, we may not be capable of conversing in this the way we should. It's all polarization right now. It's all reactive, and that's not the way to make a good decision.
Absolutely right.
I just would echo what everybody else has said, but also being, I think it needs to be deferred, as everything that you said about the emotions, and there's emotion on both sides. I would just hope that when that discussion comes, that we're open, everyone's open to listening to one another, and I hope it's more of a normal time for sure. But we don't do decision-making in isolation or have people making decisions and doing things prior to that conversation happening.
Agreed. I think we have to have a process behind this. That counts for the discussion, the rational discussion and the input piece. And so I feel it does require careful process and careful consideration. That's the reason why it's hard to kind of just push that forward right now, frankly. But that's, yeah.
Yeah, and just, just as we've been, just to talk about the emotion, as we've been sitting in this meeting, I was invited to a Facebook group about preserving the KP name, and under about it reads, King Philip alumni concerned about the movement to destroy the legacy of the high school and the context in which it was named. I don't think there's a movement to destroy anything right now. So I just want to put it out there to the public. As far as we're concerned on this committee, there's no movement to destroy anything.
Just got to talk about it,
Yeah. Well, social media can be. They pick up an item, and next thing you know, one phone call leads to 2 to 4, 4 to 8, and before you know, groups are being formed based on and ideas and thoughts are being presented to each other in a vacuum, thinking that the worst case scenario is happening. So it's unfortunate. God bless them for people steamrolling, and trying to get the message out, and they're passionate about their school. As well as I am, and I'm sure all the rest of you are. But I think Jim and Trevor hit on some great points, and it's a very emotional time that we're living in right now, and it's really not very rational to even discuss it, because not that it shouldn't be discussed in the future, but it's just that we've got some pretty high priorities that we have to deal with right now, and I think after our school committee meeting tonight, and people hear this, and our message carries forward into the community, I think it will dissipate a little bit.
I would say that I received a number of well-written, very thoughtful emails from people who had some real feelings and perspectives on this, and everybody's feelings and perspectives are valid, and they need to be heard. And so I will do my best in the next few days to try to respond to people, but I want to encourage anyone who might be watching that they can continue to reach out to me. I will save everything that's been sent to me so far, so that as you move forward in this journey, if at some future point we need to, I can pull all of that information back up and and continue to be respectful of those people who took the time and trouble to try to reach out in some way. I don't want people to feel like they took the time to write something to us and then they didn't hear back. And so I will do my best to try to make sure. And I didn't mean that any of you would not write back. I just wanted them to, people tonight to know that I've been reading, and I will continue to follow up on that. And they still have a place where they can go if they want to share or talk with somebody. I would be glad to talk with anybody about that.
Yeah, that's great. And I will say that, from my point of view, the questions and considerations that we need to take seriously. And again, my desire is not to kick it down the road to put it off, but just from my perspective, it's just right this second is kind of the challenge. But so I'm going to suggest we move on. Any more comments on that? Unless folks have this. I was going to skip the school committee unless there's any information that we should have on that. Okay. We do have executive session, which I assume will be brief. Paul,
yeah.
So is there, am I skipping anything? Okay. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn into executive session for the purpose to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, which I do, not to return to open session except for the purpose of adjournment.
Trevor, not so moved.
Is there a second?
Jim Killian, second.
Mike G, aye. Jim Lehan.
So used to not being heard, I forget to take the mic off. Jim Lehan, aye.
Yeah, Aaron.
Aaron DeStefano, aye.
Trevor not, aye.
Killian.
Jim Killian, aye.
Michelle.
Jill Shop, aye.
Bruce.
Bruce Kate, aye.
Samad.
Mod Khan, aye.
We
do not need to reconvene this debate.
What's that?
We will not need to reconvene.
We know, okay, right.
So I will.
So we're going to go off, recording off live, and say goodbye to our some of our colleagues.
I'm going to end the recording now and the live stream. So.
Bye-bye.